The Territory's road toll continues to soar, with the death of a motorist in Darwin's northern suburbs this morning. Police believe the driver was speeding.
The 33-year-old man was heading inbound along Vanderland Drive in Wallagi just after 5 o'clock this morning when his car left the road and hit a tree.
Unfortunately, the male driver was declared deceased at the scene. We've undertaken investigations at the moment with accident investigators and forensic services at the scene.
The impact of the crash shattered the tree. Police believe the driver was speeding, but it's unclear whether alcohol played a part.
Obviously, a post-mortem will be undertaken and toxicology tests will be done, and a brief will be prepared for the Northern Territory coroner.
The 33-year-old lived in nearby Wanguri and was alone in the car.
Police have spoken to the family. We have formally identified the person, and due to the request of the family, and out of that respect, we're not going to release his name at this stage.
Vanderland Drive was closed for much of the day as police investigated the cause of the crash. Police say they're doing all they can to curb the Territory road toll, which now stands at 66 compared to 40 at this time last year. Kate Carter, ABC News.
A police pursuit through Darwin this morning ended with a motorcyclist crashing into a fence. The rider of this Harley-Davidson failed to stop for a routine police check in Stewart Park. 3 police cars then gave chase, but it became too dangerous and they backed off at Winnelly. But another police car then spotted the motorbike and the pursuit continued. Unfortunately for the rider, he crashed his machine into a fence on the Stewart Highway near the city.
Call for anyone who witnessed the event, a bike being pursued by police cars with lights and sirens activated along the Stewart Highway between Parat and Winnelly to contact us.
The 46-year-old bikie was treated for minor injuries at Royal Darwin Hospital. An 11-year-old girl has been taken by a crocodile in Darwin's rural area. The attack happened near Lamble's Lagoon, about 45 kilometres southeast of Darwin. This afternoon, police found human remains not far from where the girl disappeared.
The 11-year-old girl disappeared while swimming in this creek near a swamp called the Black Jungle late yesterday afternoon. She was with her 7-year-old sister and 2 friends aged 10 and 12 when there was a splash in the water and she vanished.
They may have seen a tail of a crocodile splashing in the water, and they may have seen the head of a crocodile as well.
Police suspended an overnight search but resumed at first light this morning. Helicopters searched from the air while teams of armed officers began combing the dense bushland. Police found the girl's board shorts 70 metres downstream early this morning.
We hold grave concerns for the child. Obviously, it's a tragic incident that hits the community hard. The family are very upset by it.
The girl is believed to live nearby, and locals say they've seen crocodiles in the area.
From Aboriginal friends at the back here, they're saying it's quite common. They do come in when they're hungry or they're nesting, they've got a nest.
The family was too upset to talk to the media. Friends and neighbours comforted them and also joined the search.
It's very reedy, it's lots of obstacles in there. Obviously, we've got the risk of estuarine crocodiles as well.
Croc catchers have joined the hunt as well in the area, which is next to crocodile-infested floodplains.
To leave a child to go swimming in the bush, whether he's by themselves or with others, I don't know. But you should always have a dog or something with them. Even then, shouldn't leave children go into the bush by themselves.
The area is a restricted conservation zone where permits are needed to enter. Phoebe Stewart, ABC News, Darwin.
An alleged outburst of road rage has left a man in hospital and one of Darwin's main streets closed to traffic today. Police say a white troop carrier nudged a man riding a scooter into the path of an oncoming car on Mitchell Street. When the 42-year-old rider fell off, the troop carrier allegedly ran over him and his bike and then left the scene.
Irresponsible road use and behaviour demonstrated here indicates road rage behaviour. I'm calling for witnesses to the incident. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic in the city at this time.
Police caught the 39-year-old driver of the troop carrier shortly afterwards and he remains in custody. The scooter rider is in a stable condition.
To other news now, and a man in his 70s has been killed and his 7-year-old granddaughter seriously injured after a horrific accident in Darwin's rural area. An 18-year-old man is in police custody following the fatal hit and run.
This was the tragic scene that greeted emergency services just after 11 o'clock last night near Noonamar on the Stuart Highway, about 50 kilometres south of Darwin. A man in his 70s, his 73-year-old wife and their 4 granddaughters were travelling in this car towards Darwin. Police say the man and one of the girls was thrown from the car when it rolled after being hit by another car that was turning off the highway onto a dirt road.
This vehicle left its front bumper and its registration plate at the scene. It led us to a number of inquiries last night.
This morning, police found the second car in a ditch 40 kilometres from the scene. Investigators say the driver skidded sideways across the highway before coming to rest in nearby bushland. The 18-year-old driver was found nearby and taken to the Royal Darwin Hospital to be treated for minor injuries. Police say the elderly couple were visiting from interstate to babysit their grandchildren. The children's parents were on their way to Alice Springs when told of the tragedy.
Obviously they're traumatised by it, and the sooner they get with their family, we're provided obviously some welfare support for them as well during their trip back to Darwin. So, my heart goes out to them in this time.
The accident brings this year's road toll to 6 compared to 15 at the same time last year. Stephanie March, ABC News.
Back home, and Darwin police say a second petrol station was robbed at Knife Point in the city's northern suburbs this morning. The Jinglee petrol station was held up just a day after a man held a knife to the attendant at the Karama petrol station.
Darwin police say this man who robbed a Jinglee petrol station this morning could be the same man who held up a petrol station at Karama yesterday, but they're also not ruling out a copycat scenario. They say the attacks are almost identical.
A male walking into a service station at Karama and producing a knife and also threatening a female staff member and also stealing cash, and he also left the scene on a bicycle, which is what occurred this morning. So there are those similarities.
Both robberies happened just after daybreak, and the offenders are described as Caucasian, tall, with medium build. While today's robber has been described as aged in his 30s, yesterday's culprit is said to be in his late teens. Police have warned Darwin petrol stations to be alert. And police are still investigating a drowning death at a popular top-end swimming hole yesterday. They're yet to release the name of the Palmerston man who died, but say the 28-year-old has family in Queensland. The man disappeared under the water while swimming near the Berry Springs waterfall. His body emerged a few minutes later, but attempts to resuscitate him failed.
Look, at this stage, alcohol was a factor involved prior to him going for a swim, and I can only urge members of the public, throughout this nation that, drinking and swimming has inherent dangers attached to it.
Police say investigations into the death are continuing. Emma Masters, ABC News.
There's been another electrocution in the Northern Territory, this time at Jabiru. Police say a 24-year-old man was electrocuted as he was breaking into this Jabiru service station through the ceiling on Sunday night. The alarm was triggered about 11 o'clock and the owner arrived to find the man dead.
He's either panicked or he's tried to terminate the alarm by cutting cables with a pair of secateurs. He's inadvertently grabbed a live power cable, cut that, and obviously what appears to be he's had fatal injuries from electrocution.
It's the second electrocution in a week. On Monday, 23-year-old Palmerston man Michael Brown died on the roof of his home while adjusting his TV antenna. A report on both deaths is being prepared for the coroner. 4 amateur fishermen stranded on a remote Northern Territory beach after being washed ashore during Tropical Cyclone Paul have been found safe and well. Authorities have now had to rescue 12 people in the last 48 hours who have been unprepared for poor weather conditions. As Emma Masters reports, emergency services are becoming increasingly frustrated and say people are risking their lives.
The 4 friends set out on a fishing trip from Borroloola last Friday, unaware a cyclone was forming in the region. It wasn't long before the weather turned bad and 2-metre seas washed their boats ashore. To try to escape the cyclonic conditions, the men left their boats and camp and headed inland.
When you're sitting inside your tent, you're getting blown over and everything was just swirling, all the trees were bent right over, and so that's the decision we made upon as well, just to go back into higher ground, into the land, so we didn't get hit.
The men walked through scrub and floodplains for 4 days.
We couldn't cross any rivers. We couldn't walk along the beach because all the rivers were flooded at the time. We've seen plenty of crocs up there. We had to go up the rivers to get around them.
This morning the group was spotted by a search plane about 15 kilometres from their camp. Police say the men didn't have a portable radio, an emergency beacon or flares.
If you do get lost, stay with your boat or stay with a campsite, something that's highly visible for us as emergency services from the air. So we'll be able to see you, and I cannot stress the importance enough of carrying the appropriate safety equipment.
Meanwhile, 2 other men who went missing after attempting to walk 220 kilometres from the Calvert River near Borroloola to Doomadgee in Queensland have been found late this afternoon. Emma Masters, ABC News.
The spiralling crime rate in Alice Springs continued overnight when 2 European tourists were raped at gunpoint. The women have told police they were sleeping in their car when they were attacked by 3 men. Police used a helicopter today to search for the offender's vehicle. Tonight they remain on the run.
Police say the 2 women were camping on the side of this road last night when 3 Aboriginal men broke into their car and held them hostage for an hour. Both women were allegedly raped at gunpoint.
It's very cruel, it's very aggressive. It's on an innocent, 2 innocent females visiting our country. They're both international tourists, 21 and 28 from Europe, and obviously very traumatised by the event.
Police say the men were in their early 20s and were last seen driving a dark green car with South Australian registration plates. Police took to the air in the search for the car and they're warning people not to approach it.
We are treating the occupants as armed. The last time we have information they were in the possession of a firearm, a long arm.
Police have described the attack as a disgraceful act against humanity and say it carries a penalty of up to life in prison. They say they will catch the alleged offenders, but the women will need years of counselling.
There's not serious physical injury, but the psychological injury that results for such a traumatic event is huge.
The attacks are the latest in a spate of violent incidents in the town. Alison Horn, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Political editor Chris Yeoman. The town of Alice Springs was once the quaint capital of Australia's Red Centre. But today, Alice is caught in a spiral of alcohol-fuelled violence and crime. It was highlighted earlier this month when 2 foreign tourists were allegedly attacked and raped while sleeping in their car. Aborigines are blamed for much of the trouble and they say it's time to tackle the root causes. But residents just want a crackdown, as Mike Sexton reports.
Winter has arrived in Central Australia, and each evening as the sun drops, so does the mercury. The night brings with it sub-zero temperatures and a full police contingent onto the streets of Alice Springs.
Yeah, Roger, the Jazz supervisor will sort all that out for me, thanks.
Recently, 14 new police recruits have arrived in Alice Springs in an effort to get on top of a crime spree that's eating away at the town. On this shift, police are confronted with the gruesome consequences of a night of heavy drinking.
It's obviously just a head wound, it's bleeding quite profusely. We've got a bandage on and applied the pressure. It stopped bleeding. He's conscious, talking, he's intoxicated. Obviously the urgency level is probably not his first thought. Unfortunately, the sad fact is assaults are quite common in these areas. As you can see, there's no formal housing established here. It's a camp-type facility.
Emergency service workers take the injured man to hospital while 2 suspects are detained, all overseen by the Northern Territory's Police Commissioner John McRoberts.
There has been social dysfunction in Alice Springs for well over 30 years. This is not a new or emerging issue. This is a situation that has flourished for many years. I have heard loud and clear the message from the citizens of Alice Springs that they're fed up with the situation in the town.
So if we get an emergency in the middle of the night, we're going to have to put someone on the couch. Yeah.
Dale Wakefield runs a high-security shelter for women and children fleeing domestic violence. If this year is like the last, then the facility will house almost 900 people, 95% of whom will be Indigenous.
What we're finding is that Our self-referrals to the service have gone in 4 years from 12% to 58% of all our referrals. So women are really seeking a service and are seeking a place of safety, which we feel is very positive, but I think it does show that there is a large unmet demand out there.
Although Alice Springs is a town worn down by daily crime, a recent event shocked even its most hardened citizens.
The spiralling crime rate in Alice Springs continued overnight. The women have told police they were sleeping in their car when they were attacked by 3 men.
The alleged rape at gunpoint of 2 European backpackers has led to 3 teenagers being detained.
Let's hope that it's a one-off, but it is an escalation.
Steve Brown is born and bred in Alice Springs and successfully ran for the town council on a law and order ticket. While he applauds the police commissioner's visit, he believes the recent crackdown must become permanent.
We're looking to the police to do that all the time, not some of the time. We have this sort of a boom and bust cycle where they police and they say, look, we've quietened it all down, they pack everything up and they go back to Darwin, and then they wait until we're in an absolute crisis point again, which they've done to us this time, and now we really are in real crisis point. And they come back in and say they're going to rescue us again.
The Territory has more police per capita than any other jurisdiction in Australia. It also has the highest rate of recidivism in the country. And according to the Central Australian Aboriginal Legal Aid Service, imprisonment rates have increased by almost 50% in the past decade without having any impact on crime rates.
There's a disturbing sort of resignation about the fact that people may spend some time in custody. So it's arguably less of a deterrent in a jurisdiction like this where it's so common.
Just for information, Wi-Fi phone back up.
Many believe crime is the result of years of social neglect that's been accelerated by a population drift from remote communities into town and a baby boom in the 1990s that's produced a population bubble of teenagers.
Young adults in their early 40s and mid-40s are grandparents. Now that's a demographic and an identified need that, in my view, requires the government to have a differential response.
Indigenous leaders believe the crime rate will only fall when advances are made in disadvantaged communities. One of the most obvious is housing, and to illustrate the point, 730 was invited to one of the town camps, a 5-minute drive from the Alice Springs CBD.
We come to Hobbies Camp, and this is Dickie Brown's house. And all the time inside this house there's over 30 people. It's a 2-bedroom house.
As some adults sleep inside the house, outside in the freezing morning air, more than a dozen women and children eat breakfast, including Territory MP Alison Anderson. Despite campaigning for better conditions, she's seen her grandnieces, such as Imogen, growing up in squalor.
They're still here. This is the sad thing, that they're still here living in the same situation as they was living in 3 years ago. And I think if we're serious about closing the gap in Aboriginal disadvantage, then there has to be a serious consultation with people.
The 17 town camps are where people from remote communities stay when they come to Alice Springs for services. Among them are young people, often looking for excitement in town.
We moved on to kids, more activities at night for kids. I think mothers and fathers not controlling, or they're not boss themselves, kids.
The federal and territory governments have spent millions of dollars upgrading some houses and building new ones, but housing is only one disadvantage. Others are education, health and employment, which is why a group of Indigenous service agencies have formed a coalition to better address social issues.
For me, I think it's about embracing where governments have made positive change, but they have to equally recognise where that positive change and the impact of years of neglect and failure of services and programs is now at a point where it's escalating beyond everyone's capacity, and we have to work collaboratively to address it.
There are 190 officers for the estimated 27,000 people who call Alice Springs home. The police are not commenting on whether or not they're having ongoing extra operations, but their chief officer believes their most important task is building a foundation for social reform.
The future of Alice Springs lies in all of our hands. If we don't do anything about it, if we don't give this a go, I suspect that in 12 months' time we'll be saying the same thing as they were 30 years ago, and I don't think that's good enough.
Muslims have gathered in Darwin to discuss their concerns about the harassment of women in religious dress in the Northern Territory. Late last year, several women were abused in Palmerston for wearing a hijab. But as Anthony Stewart reports, community leaders are confident Darwin remains a tolerant community.
Darwin's Islamic Centre joined forces with police and other community leaders to tackle racist incidents before they become a problem. Late last year, several women wearing hijabs were harassed in Palmerston. The attacks were isolated, but members of the Muslim community wanted to know help was available.
To let the people know what to do and who to call for help, and give them a bit of peace of mind that they are not alone.
Women at the meeting called for wider efforts to tackle misconceptions about Islam.
He said, but being a Muslim, I am feeling threatened. How do you plan to educate people in Darwin about Islam and that we're not really threatening people?
Thank you so much, speakers, for encouraging us to report any incident, whether verbal or physical.
Police are investigating the incidents in Palmerston. They've stressed anyone who threatens someone due to their cultural dress will be prosecuted.
The message is it's unacceptable. It can reach into the criminal realm as well. It can actually be a crime to threaten someone.
Darwin's Imam says local Muslims won't respond to harassment in kind.
Our women, or even the men as well, if they are, found or they're confronted or they are in a predicament or in that situation when they're faced with these situations, then they will turn it to positivity.
There are plans to make the forum an annual event. Anthony Stewart, ABC News, Darwin.
An Aboriginal man has died in custody at a police station in central Darwin. Police confirmed that the 59-year-old was taken into custody for alcohol offences last night. Territory correspondent Danny Teese-Johnson has the latest.
Well, tragic news out of Darwin last night that a 59-year-old Indigenous man was arrested in the CBD under alcohol offences. He was taken to the Darwin City lockup, and then at 9 p.m. that man was found deceased. Now, he was arrested under a paperless arrest. We don't know much detail around it as yet, but he was due to receive an infringement notice. But this would mean that's the first death in custody under a paperless arrest. But here's what the police had to say earlier today.
Northern Territory Police apprehended a 59-year-old Indigenous male in the Darwin City for liquor-related offences. The male was conveyed to the Darwin Watch House and processed in accordance with entry protocol, including a health screening assessment. Routine cell checks were conducted. During the period, the male was in custody. As part of these duties, and a short time after 9 p.m. that evening, the male was noted to be unresponsive. Subsequent checks indicated he had passed away. An assessment by the attending Watch House nurse and St John's ambulance confirmed this. Crime Command, with oversight from the Professional Standards Command, will investigate this matter on behalf of the Northern Territory Coroner and prepare a file for him. The family has been notified and an autopsy and continuing investigations are underway. No further information will be provided around this investigation, and as I said, the file will be prepared for the Northern Territory Coroner. Given the state of this incident, it is a death in custody. An inquest is mandatory and a public forum will be coordinated through the Northern Territory Coroner and further public information will be available then.
How routinely were the checks done in the cells? The police statement this morning said he wasn't checked till after 9 p.m. when he was arrested at 6. This statement says there are routine checks.
Yeah, there are routine checks throughout 24/7. The Watch House operates. The custodial staff, the Watch House nurses check staff frequently.
So there's what the Darwin Crime Commander had to say about this. As he said, there's not much detail coming. It's now going to a coronial inquest. It sits with the coroner now, and NITV News will be following this story very closely. I'm Danny Teese-Johnson in the top end for NITV News.
Territory Police have a new weapon in their search for fugitive Ronald Kelly, a chequebook. $1,000 is being offered for information that leads to the 22-year-old's arrest. He hasn't been seen since a siege near Darwin earlier this week, as Jesse Dorset reports.
In hiding for a week, his face will now be pinned up all over town.
I'll just say lock up, be vigilant in your home security.
Frustrated, police are handing out their phone number, hoping to set up a date.
I would urge Ronald to make contact with us on 131 444 so we can safely orchestrate your surrender.
the last time they almost met. It's believed the 22-year-old slipped away before the 6-hour siege in Palmerston even began.
We have not seen him since Tuesday night.
He hasn't been on Facebook since then either. Ronald Kelly is wanted for crimes, including the theft of 6 guns last week.
Our search obviously incorporates the entire Northern Territory. Any information that comes in from the public or other sources, we'll interrogate that information and provide a response.
Officers are now investigating if he's responsible for other property offences around Darwin.
Those links are still being examined at the moment.
A $1,000 reward is being offered for information about Ronald Kelly's whereabouts. Jesse Dorset, ABC News.
In a major embarrassment to the Northern Territory's correction system, 2 teenagers who escaped from a youth detention centre have broken back into the facility near Darwin. The 16-year-olds were recaptured after doing burnouts and laps for half an hour in a stolen car. They're tonight being tested for drugs and alcohol under the guard of police.
On the run for 2 days, the escapees return. They evaded a major manhunt, in the end driving themselves back into detention. Literally. The tiny car's bonnet crumpled from their grand entrance.
I understand their manner of driving inside the complex was unsafe. It was demonstrated by ramming 2 roller doors to start with.
Over half an hour, the stolen hatchback tears up the grounds, the pair taunting police. Officers called out to the 16-year-olds, pleading with them to surrender.
A containment was put up around it and a surrender was successfully negotiated with the 2 youths inside the vehicle.
The teenagers broke out of Dondale Youth Detention Centre on Sunday. They were spotted allegedly stealing petrol, the police chase ending here. Heavily armed officers, the dog squad and paramedics surrounded the perimeter, the prison in lockdown.
No one's been hurt. All the community, all the correctional staff inside were secured.
It's unclear why the teenagers broke out, only to break back in.
I've got no idea. Their intent is unclear to me at this point in time.
As Dondale settles back down, police are keeping a close eye on the teenagers back in the watch house. They'll be tested for drugs and alcohol. Detectives will then interview the alleged escapees. Jesse Dorset, ABC News, Berrima.
Good evening, Eleni Roussos with ABC News. An 18-year-old man involved in a horror crash in Darwin's outskirts overnight has died. He was a passenger in a stolen car that ploughed into a four-wheel drive. Police say the car reached speeds of up to 180 kilometres an hour when it crashed. The driver of the car, who fled the accident, is tonight under police guard in hospital.
A mangled mess, the aftermath of a high-speed collision at 3 o'clock this morning in Darwin's Howard Springs.
The Jeep has entered the intersection under a green light. The Commodore has entered the intersection against a red light at speed.
Police say the white sedan slammed into the four-wheel drive at 185 kilometres an hour. The collision took down a power pole, causing a large-scale explosion of glass, metal, panelling and other car parts.
It's fairly evident at the speed it was travelling by, the horrific scene behind us, and the amount of debris spread for a few hundred metres in all directions.
2 teenage boys were cut from the sedan and taken to Royal Darwin Hospital in a critical condition, while a teenage girl also travelling in the car was stable. The 19-year-old driver fled the scene but was taken into custody after police located him in Palmerston later in the morning.
The force of the impact was so severe, the driver of the four-wheel drive was ejected from his car to the other side of the road, landing at the base of a tree nearly 20 metres away. His engine was also thrown 15 metres.
He was initially assessed to be in a critical condition but has since stabilised. For hours afterwards, traffic was reduced to a crawl. A string of alleged crimes around town leading up to the crash may be connected, starting with this white hatchback stolen on Saturday and involved in this fueled drive-off in Durack just before 7 last night. Police believe this hatchback was used by 3 youths in a carjacking at Winnelly of a white sedan. A white sedan was also used in an armed robbery at Fanny Bay around midnight.
There were attempts to apprehend the vehicle, but due to public safety concerns, no pursuits were terminated.
Police say they found a shotgun believed to be used in the Fanny Bay robbery in the back of the white sedan that ran the red light. They're urging witnesses to any of the incidents to contact them. Claire McGrath, ABC News.
About 100 police officers took to the streets in Darwin Centre today for National Police Remembrance Day. Commemorations began with a wreath-laying service this morning and ended with a service at St Mary's Cathedral. 9 Territorian police officers have died while on duty, 55 have died while serving. The most recent police officer to die in the Territory was Glenn Hewitson, who was ambushed and shot by Rodney Ansell at a roadblock 16 years ago.
A time for the community to reflect on the service policing provides, the dangers attached to it, and the risks people take in the police force to keep our community safe.
Services were also held in Alice Springs, Katherine, Tennant Creek and Nhulunbuy.
The Northern Territory coroner has recommended cameras be installed in the back of all police vans in light of a man taking his life in custody in September last year. But it's not a new recommendation. Police should have installed cameras after an inquest into the death of another person more than 4 years ago, as Christy O'Brien reports.
These are the final moments of 23-year-old Dale Walkinshaw's life. He was being taken to Royal Darwin Hospital for testing after being arrested for drink driving. He'd crashed his car and injured a female passenger. It was during this transfer he tried to take his life in the back of the van. Police managed to resuscitate him, but he died 3 days later from his injuries. Coroner Greg Kavanagh found the cause of death was self-inflicted, but noted Mr Walkinshaw was in a vulnerable state because of being under the influence and thought he'd killed the girl he was travelling with. In light of the death, the coroner formally recommended cameras be installed in every caged vehicle in the Northern Territory, so police can observe those in custody. The inquest revealed this was far from an isolated incident. There have been at least 16 cases since 2012 in the Northern Territory where people in custody have tried to end their lives in the back of a police van by hanging or strangulation alone. The coroner found police were well aware of the risk. In their own internal review, police committed to installing cameras after an inquest in 2013. And just 2 weeks before Dale Walkinshaw's death, the coroner had again urged cameras be installed. The coroner said in his view, it was not a matter of if a person would die in the back of a police van, but when. And it is tragic that it took the death of this young man to focus the minds of senior police. But a year on and still very little action.
We've got 1 camera in a van at the moment and we're working with the distributor to import them into Australia and roll them out in the timeline that I gave at the coronial, around 12 months.
Dale Walkinshaw's family were not present at the coroner's findings. Christy O'Brien, ABC News.
Assistant Police Commissioner of Crime has started giving evidence in the trial of his former boss, John McRoberts. Michael Murphy was the Chief of Staff to Mr McRoberts in 2014, when it's alleged the former Commissioner attempted to pervert the course of justice.
John McRoberts is accused of trying to interfere in a travel agent fraud investigation in 2014, which had marked his intimate friend Jana Commitsis as its key target. Assistant Commissioner Michael Murphy worked closely with Mr McRoberts at the time, but told court he only observed a professional relationship between the pair. From time to time, we'd see Alexandra Commitsis in the Qantas Club. They were purely professional. The Assistant Commissioner told the court he remembered Mr McRoberts declaring he had a friendship with Commitsis at a morning police briefing in 2014, but said the words didn't go beyond friendship. He told the defence Mr McRoberts had been a hands-on police commissioner, driving change within the force and getting involved in operations. He was a commissioner who would join the men in patrols at various times, and women, yes. Michael Murphy also gave evidence about a meeting Mr McRoberts held with the Australian Federation of Travel Agents in August 2014, before Commitsis was arrested in November. The court heard that Mr McRoberts told those at this meeting that one of the Territory Government's priorities was tourism, and that if criminal action was launched against 27 travel agents at the same time, this could be crippling. Earlier, the police officer in charge of the fraud squad responded to defence questions about the costly nature of the investigation. I don't think you can put a cost on investigating crime. I believe the public expects police to investigate crime accordingly. The cross-examination of Assistant Commissioner Michael Murphy will continue on Thursday. Felicity James, ABC News.
Northern Territory coroner has slammed police for a botched investigation into the death of an Indigenous woman, but he stopped short of accepting the failings were due to institutional racism. Police say they'll learn from their mistakes, but the coroner says he's heard those promises before. Stephen Schubert reports.
An apology offered for a failed investigation.
How can you apologise to us again for the third time? You should apologise only once. They were too slow.
The coroner said police botched the homicide case of Sasha Green, a mother of two who died from a stab wound to the thigh in Tennant Creek in 2013. Her death has left a permanent mark on her family.
They always say, someone's missing. We should be here with our mother. It's always birthday when they have their birthdays.
The coroner found the investigation was undertaken by inexperienced officers in an incompetent fashion. He slammed police for destroying forensic material, saying it is outrageous. No one has been charged for the suspicious death, but police say the woman's de facto partner remains the prime suspect.
Not too happy, not fair.
I concede that we've made mistakes during this investigation. And I apologise to the family for those mistakes and the delays they've experienced.
But citing a number of cases where police made similar mistakes, the coroner said there is a time when apologies are no longer sufficient. The community is not only entitled to expect better investigations, it is entitled to expect that the police force will learn from its mistakes. The Green family's lawyers argued that police failings could be put down to institutional racism.
Maybe that's racist. Some do, some are racist.
The coroner didn't accept that submission, but only because it was made late in the coronial hearings and wasn't put to the appropriate senior police officers. That may have a big impact in any future coronial inquests. Stephen Schubert, ABC News.
Insists its inventory of bullets is sufficient to meet operational and training needs. It comes as the government announced the reintroduction of armed police officers at schools.
They're essential for the protection of police and the public, but the association that represents officers says bullet supplies are running low. In a statement, the union said, "We've received complaints that there is a shortage of ammunition and members are not receiving new ammunition each year when they undertake their requalification." But police have rejected reports the force's backup supply dropped down to just 500 bullets, in addition to those carried by officers.
Oh, geez, we're in trouble if that's true. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that number. I think it's a little bit more than that, but I can tell you we've had a delivery of stock today, so it was on back order, so it is critically important.
The police force is under budget pressure, and the Deputy Commissioner has acknowledged that cheaper bullets are now being used in training.
Training ammunition is slightly cheaper than operational rounds, and it's really indifferent on the field when you're training, so it is a cost measure as well.
The opposition says budget constraints should not come at the cost of safety.
Last week we heard reports about police not having tasers. Earlier this year there were police vests. We absolutely need to do everything we can to keep our police safe.
The ammunition issue comes as the Territory Government announced that armed police will return to schools. 10 existing officers will be stationed at middle and high schools in major centres from next term.
If we engage with youth that are going off the rails earlier, that we can see that there are problems with, the sooner we engage with them, the better.
Our schools are just a microcosm of our larger community. If we get it right in our schools, that will have a wonderful ripple-on effect out into our wider community.
The opposition has welcomed the return of school-based police but says it should be done with additional officers, not existing ones. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
The Northern Territory Health Minister says government officials became aware of Legionella bacteria at the new Palmerston Regional Hospital almost. The Territory Chief Minister today got a first-hand look at the damage caused by Tropical Cyclone Trevor, which ravaged Gulf communities on the weekend. The Category 4 system brought winds of up to 250 kilometres per hour and forced the evacuation of thousands of people.
These Numbulwar residents are overjoyed to be home. They were among more than 2,000 people evacuated from this region before severe tropical cyclone Trevor headed their way.
It was so sad to leave our community. The first time to go to Catherine, we left our pets behind. It was so sad about leaving all the cats behind and dogs, because they're part of our culture.
Do you have some idea with your
This morning, residents lined up for their hardship payments, an incentive to ensure everyone returns to their communities in a timely manner and is safely accounted for. Despite preparing for the worst, many Numbawa residents were surprised to find their homes undamaged.
I got a bit homesick when I was in Catherine. I didn't like it. I didn't like it to go, but it's what a good option for me to be safe. It's rather be safe than getting hurt.
Schools have already gone back in Borroloola, although some are still missing teachers and pupils who are yet to return to the community. Shops are back in business, although one Borroloola store had to throw out thousands of dollars worth of food when the power went out.
And to replenish it all again and see what we've got here today, so it's been a bit of a tough ask. Yeah. But there was we didn't jeopardise anyone's health or safety. Everything's been dumped and everything's replenished with fresh and new.
Many people have returned to Borroloola, very fortunate that they found their houses still standing relatively unscathed. But not everyone's been so lucky. For people in this neighbourhood, there's still quite a clean-up ahead of them.
You move out of Borroloola, we've got canopies on trees. As we move further across, there's no canopies on trees. Then a lot of the trees aren't standing and there's just some sticks. And you can see the devastation that would have caused if it actually hit a coastal community and the people.
As for the damage bill, that's still unknown.
I don't have yet the quote in for what the fuel bill will be, but we obviously couldn't have done this without the fence. Extraordinary amount of work. I haven't got the invoice yet.
And still another month of cyclone season to go. Alexia Atwood, ABC News, Borroloola.
Northern Territory Police Commissioner Rhys Kershaw has been named the new head of the Australian Federal Police. In his more than 3 years in the top Territory job, Commissioner Kershaw has dealt with low morale, officers on trial and major budget restraints. His sudden departure now leaves the force asking who will take over.
Just 8 months ago, he signed up for another 5 years at the helm of the Northern Territory Police. But this morning, Commissioner Rhys Kershaw sent shockwaves through the force.
It's an honour and a privilege to lead the men and women of the Australian Federal Police.
He's currently on sick leave after a recent health scare, but even ministers were surprised to hear the Commissioner wouldn't be coming back.
No, I wasn't aware of that one.
We had a conversation before the press conference.
His own staff left in the dark.
I only found out about it moments before the media interview.
Members will be disappointed. They heard about his departure, involving a press release in Canberra as opposed to him telling his members direct. I'm sure that won't go down well with the membership.
An ambitious Territory cop, now head of the Australian Federal Police. And he's not the first to make the switch. In 1988, Peter McCauley took on the top job after leading the NT's force. When he left in 1994, Territory Commissioner Mick Palmer took his place.
It's a testament to the great work undertaken in the Northern Territory.
Rhys Kershaw took on the Northern Territory Police Commissioner role in 2015. It was a troubling time, with former Commissioner John McRoberts facing allegations he was later jailed for. Since then, he's seen numerous officers leave senior positions, as well as made critical changes to the police force.
We have seen some fantastic results under his leadership, including the recruitment of almost 120 additional police and the police auxiliary liquor inspectors on the ground, 75 of them.
He also had to make the decision to restructure senior officers, cutting the Territory Duty Superintendent positions and freezing promotions. When Commissioner Kershaw's contract was renewed last year, it was to bring continuity and stability back. But now concerns are being raised.
For a period of time, whether it's short or long, it can destabilise the workforce. That's our role, and the role of the workforce is to pull that together.
We have certainly seen instability in the past and we want to avoid that moving forward, so we want a commissioner appointed as soon as possible.
Current Acting Commissioner Michael Murphy wouldn't say if he would apply for the role, but territory and interstate candidates will be considered.
We're not recognising boundaries anymore. It's the right person for the job and doing the right thing to protect Territory's interests.
And while it's still unclear what Commissioner Kershaw's legacy will be, his recent handling of a mass shooting in Darwin will be one remembered for years to come. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
The Northern Territory's annual Police Association conference has today highlighted numerous changes officers want to see on the force. Among discussion around police numbers and promotions came some positive feedback for the officers on the ground on the night of the Darwin shooting.
The night will be etched in the minds of many Territorians for years to come, and undoubtedly has those police officers involved thinking about every decision they made. But preliminary findings of an independent report into the police response to the Darwin shooting has presented some positive results.
Our response times were comparable to any national or international police force in the world. Our officers responded in accordance with knowledge, experience and training.
However, it's understood some policy, procedure and training recommendations will be made. The early findings were mentioned at the NT Police Association's annual conference this morning, where this year's focus is on stability, resources, well-being and promotions within the ranks.
With changing policy, changing legislation and of course those stresses on filling those frontline rosters, numbers are always an issue for our association.
The aim is to recruit 120 new police, and by the time 2 recruit squads graduate next April, the target should have been met. But more people are leaving the force than are being recruited.
Well, we're seeing an attrition rate at the moment of around 5 officers per month, so looking at 60 people per year leaving the organisation.
And rosters are already going unfilled.
We're going to have 2 watch houses here in Darwin within the next month or 2, and we haven't had additional staff to fill that.
The organisation was commended for sticking to a budget last year, but it came at the cost of a senior restructure and freeze on promotions, something the Police Minister has promised to change.
I just simply do not think that we've kept pace over the years, and we do require some change.
Along with adjustments to disciplinary systems. The importance of camaraderie in the force was also acknowledged, commemorating the loss of mates on the thin blue line and the life of fallen officer Glenn Hewitson. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
Firefighters are continuing to battle intense blazes at Dundee. Emergency services were also back on the fire ground at Darwin's rural area, where blazes are still flaring up in Humpty Doo and Berry Springs. Authorities say they're treating all of the blazes as suspicious.
Firefighters disappearing into the darkness as homes are swallowed by smoke. Sunday afternoon in the rural area was blanketed in thick black ash. Residents were forced to make tough decisions to stay or evacuate their homes.
I was only a little bit nervous as I got told that they were evacuating on Thomas Road, but the fireys kept us informed and they gave us updates as they were going along.
It's been a nightmare weekend for the top end's already exhausted emergency services after fires in Katherine last week and Humpty Doo just yesterday.
We also saw the Gerraween fire on Friday. That saw 11 ground crews from Bushfires NT to assist NTFRS, and we had 6 aircraft in to assist for that fire as well.
Remarkably, no one was hurt and no properties were lost, but as the full extent of the scorched earth became clear, firefighters were back out to Humpty Doo after just a few hours rest.
I can tell you there were people working here last night at 2:30 a.m. and they were back here at first light this morning, so we certainly hope that they'll get a rest soon.
Gamba grass and dry, windy conditions fueled the flare-ups, but fire crews were on the ground and the air quickly.
Police are reminding rural area residents to take care on total fire ban days like we've seen over the last week. Failing to properly maintain your property or recklessly lighting a fire can carry fines of more than $600.
Sometimes it might not be just a ticket. Sometimes if it actually leads to the destruction of property, you could look at facing court as well.
Authorities are treating the fires in recent days as suspicious.
They're not naturally occurring. It is a dry type of the time of the year, but it's quite unusual for a number of fires in this nature just to start.
A total fire ban has been declared for the Darwin and Adelaide River areas on Tuesday. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
Northern Territory police officers marched through the streets of Darwin today to commemorate the 30th annual National Police Remembrance Day. The day is an occasion to remember those who died in the line of duty and also to reflect on those officers who are no longer walking the beat.
It's a day to pay tribute to those police who gave their lives. Not just here in Australia, but also in the Pacific, including New Zealand and Papua New Guinea. Police members and their families pause to remember the fallen.
Thought they never would be, killed in the line of duty. God bless all those who fell. They are missed and loved so well.
We stop and remember as a community, not just a police force, of the danger officers put themselves in every day, and we honour the people who have been killed in service and have died while serving.
A march through Darwin City Centre to a memorial service at St Mary's Cathedral, with music and the laying of flowers. Signs of respect for those who have passed. This year also marked the 20th anniversary of the shooting death of an officer who became known as a Territory hero.
20 years since we lost Glenn Hewitson down at Albino Road in tragic circumstances, and of course as recently as last month we lost Constable Melanie Tyndall, tragically off duty but doing something she loved.
Constable Tyndall was killed last month after falling from her horse on the racetrack. In the year of an unprecedented mass shooting in Darwin, the day also reflected on the trauma police officers face every day in their important role of keeping the community safe. Kate Ashton, ABC News.
Good evening, Amy Colbert with ABC News. The remote Central Australian community of Yuendamu is reeling after a 19-year-old man was shot and killed by police last night. Police say the man attacked officers who were trying to arrest him, but family and locals say there are questions that need answers and they want justice. Katrina Bevan reports.
A sorry camp in the centre. The largest remote community in Central Australia is grieving.
This is a tragedy for all the tribe and all the family members of this community, and everybody want to know, every community, every people in town in Australia want to know what really happened.
The family of 19-year-old Warlpiri man Kumanjai Walker want answers.
That's what they told us. They said he's getting medical assistance. So when I went to bed last night, we were praying. We thought, OK, he might be able to pull through. Miracle, he might be able to pull through. The whole time he was dead, just sitting there at the police station.
Police arrived at Kumanjai Walker's home just after 7 o'clock last night over alleged property offences and assaulting police.
As they attempted to apprehend him, he lunged at the members. My understanding is he was armed with a weapon.
But not everyone believes that that's what happened.
He stabbed one policeman. Okay, no, true.
An eyewitness says her young children were inside the house.
Then I seen him trying to fight the restraint, against the wall, and that's when they hit him and threw him to the ground, to the bed, the mattress, and I couldn't see from there, and that's when I heard the 3 gunshots.
The young man was taken to the police station instead of the clinic. All health staff had evacuated earlier that day.
You're late, ambulance, you're late.
It took hours for help to arrive. By then, it was already too late.
They could have used, tasers or something else, pepper spray. They're trained to do this, They didn't have to do what they done. It's wrong.
Senior police flew in today to make apologies.
I thought it was really important to come to your community today and give my condolences to your loss.
Though tensions are high and the community is extremely upset, there's been no violence or clashes here today in Yuendamu. However, the community says all trust in police is gone and they want no police presence here for the next year. They also want the coronial inquest to be held in Yuendamu. Police have launched an internal investigation. Katrina Bevan, ABC News, Yuendamu.
As the news rippled across the Red Centre this morning, protesters gathered in Alice Springs, accusing police of having blood on their hands. The Chief Minister fronted the cameras in Darwin, promising a full investigation into the incident and a warning this story contains an image of Kumanjai Walker used with the permission of his family. Melissa McKay reports. Cries of anger and calls for answers. Armed police positioned at the doors of the Alice Springs police station as protesters gathered on the doorstep.
It is a very, very sad day today. This affects the whole community. It affects the whole nation.
As their numbers grew, so too did their questions.
Police should have been arrest a person and not using a gun. The gun is a dangerous weapon that shouldn't have been used.
The question of why lethal force was used left largely unanswered.
That will be part of the investigation. I no doubt that the investigators will be asking the questions of the officer who was involved.
The community's health clinic was unstaffed when the shooting happened. The government says the staff had evacuated earlier in the afternoon because 2 workers had been assaulted, leaving the closest care 2 hours away. The Royal Flying Doctor Service was called, but Kumanjai Walker died before they could reach him. The Chief Minister says day services at the community's clinic will return tomorrow.
We're working to provide healthcare to the people of Yuendamu while looking after the safety concerns of the staff who are servicing that community.
Community members today called for police to be removed from Yuendamu completely, something the Chief Minister says won't happen.
I think it would be irresponsible for us not to provide and continue to provide those police in that community, make sure all in that community felt safe.
Police have launched an internal investigation, but protesters say they want an independent watchdog brought in.
There will be a coronial inquest. There will be a thorough internal police review into how this tragic event happened.
A decision is yet to be made about whether the officers involved will be stood down, but they have left Yuendamu. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
Hundreds of people in the Northern Territory are tonight bracing for the impact of a Category 2 cyclone, with parts of East Arnhem Land lying directly in its predicted path. Authorities are warning residents on Groote Eylandt to expect the possibility of destructive rains and winds as the community there grapples with the active COVID cases too at the same time. Matt Garrick reports.
On the Gulf of Carpentaria, a nervous community awaits its fate.
The first impacts will be felt on Groote Eylandt overnight tonight.
Ex-tropical cyclone Tiffany was downgraded to a low as it crossed Cape York in far north Queensland last night, but is now regaining intensity. If it stays on its current track, East Arnhem Land's Groote Eylandt, a service and mining hub that's home to multiple remote Aboriginal communities, is sitting squarely in Tiffany's path. Heavy rain and potentially destructive winds of up to 165 kilometres per hour are expected.
What comes with flood and cyclone risk is that you get fallen power lines, fallen trees. As we saw with Cyclone Marcus here in Darwin, a lot of that same damage will be seen out in those areas.
There are currently active cases of COVID in the community there, which residents say is adding to the stress.
Oh yes, it definitely does add an extra layer of worry to it. Absolutely. We were dealing with that situation, and then the cyclone comes in over the top of it. It does tend to escalate things a little bit.
Police say the COVID patients should not need to shelter with others in the community as they're currently isolating in cyclone-coded homes. In 2019, Groote Eylandt was included in one of the Territory's biggest ever evacuation operations when Cyclone Trevor approached the region. Back then, hundreds of people were forced to evacuate the island for Darwin. Police say that won't be happening this time, mainly because Trevor was a much bigger system, a Category 4.
There'll be no evacuations, adequate shelter is in place, and management teams are coordinating that through their local controllers.
Translators have been sent to the island's remote communities to let residents know if they do need to seek shelter, now is the time to do so. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
Good evening, Isaac Naruzi with ABC News. The NT government has again changed the rules around COVID-19 testing, with rapid antigen tests now the main method to check for the virus. The Chief Minister says thousands of the tests are being handed out for free each day at government pandemic sites, but for private businesses, they still remain in short supply.
Over the past few weeks, Alexis Innes says the phones at her Darwin pharmacy have been ringing off the hook as the demand for rapid antigen tests soars.
The supply hasn't been there to meet the demand, so it's been challenging.
While she awaits the delivery of thousands of rapid tests, there's uncertainty about when supplies will increase.
From the big suppliers down south, we are not seeing any stock. We're not really seeing an ETA. Some people are saying the middle of the month, towards the end of the month. But I just think the supply will be challenging over the next month or so.
And the demand is only set to grow as the Northern Territory Government expands the use of rapid antigen tests in response to the Omicron variant.
Speed gives us an advantage over Omicron. The increasing use of rapid antigen tests has been a good thing. Territorians don't have to wait as long to get tested, they don't have to wait as long for a result, and our health experts can get a quicker idea of the caseload.
Among a raft of changes introduced by the government today, people will no longer be required to get a PCR test to confirm a positive rapid test. But it's now mandatory for people to report their positive COVID rapid test results on the government's website. If they don't, they'll face a hefty fine. But how it'll be enforced remains to be seen.
If through investigation and contact tracing we identify people who are positive and having a risk on community, haven't declared it or uploaded the correct information, they'll be subject to a $5,024 fine.
All close contacts also now need to take a rapid test within the first 3 days of isolation instead of a PCR test. Health authorities say getting results back quickly is now the priority.
In a high prevalence environment like we have today, rapid turnaround of results is more important than the superior accuracy that we were seeing on PCR.
The NT government says it's ordered more than 1 million rapid antigen tests for Territorians and is giving out thousands every day. And while people can collect the tests for free from government pandemic centres, businesses are required to source their own. Nearly half of the NT's 550 new COVID cases were positive results from a rapid antigen test, with hospitalisations dropping to 24, including one person in ICU. And while authorities say cases have plateaued this week, it's still too early to say whether the Omicron curve has been flattened. Husni Isham for ABC News.
Lockouts have also been extended for 2 remote communities. Melissa McKay reports.
It's supposed to be a Territorian's first weapon against COVID-19, but today the Chief Minister admitted someone failed to load the gun.
Messages are intended to inform someone they have been to an exposure site and to monitor for symptoms. Over the past week, these messages have not been sent.
The Northern Territory Government stopped publishing public exposure sites online last week, supposedly replacing that system with a direct text message based on check-in app data. But now we know since January 10, there's been no way to know if you've been in casual contact with COVID-19.
Territorians have a right to be told when they have been to an exposure site, "I am sorry this did not happen. Nothing excuses it. It will happen now."
The Chief Minister says the person responsible has been stood down from the Emergency Operations Centre but continues working in their normal role. Meanwhile, the lockout in Yuendumu and Yuelamu has been extended by 5 days as the remote COVID cluster grows to 43 cases. Despite a surge in vaccines, unvaccinated residents will only have a few reasons to leave home until Thursday next week.
Because the numbers have gone up, we need some more time. So please work with us about having more tests done, and please increase your immunisation rate. Get the needle. It's good for you. It's good for your family and your elders.
There were no new cases of COVID-19 in Amungana, which entered lockout yesterday. With a mask mandate in place and vaccine passes now required across the Northern Territory, police say they've been reasonably happy with Territorians' compliance, but that there have been a few issues, including reports of people exploiting the government system of free rapid antigen tests and selling them off for a profit.
We have a current case in Darwin where people are publicising this on social media about on-selling rapid antigen tests. Our Operation Crown detectives and our investigators are currently looking into this now.
While this Darwin business has been slapped with a second fine for breaching health directions, despite already being forced to shut down last week. Melissa McKay, ABC News. Northern Territory Police are asking people to be on the lookout for 3 men who escaped the Barkly work camp in Tennant Creek overnight. The prisoners left the facility after removing their electric monitoring devices around 11:30 last night. Ezra Austral, Richard Henwood and Maximus Cutter are believed to have stolen a silver Nissan Navara ute in Tennant Creek.
They're on the Stewart Highway possibly. If anyone sees this vehicle, please ring 131 444 and report that.
People are urged not to approach the men but to contact police.
After more than 5 days on the run, the final prisoner who escaped a Tennant Creek work camp has been captured. Ezra Austral was arrested last night after managing to evade a widespread police manhunt since Sunday. The 23-year-old was found just hours after his fellow escapees, Maximus Cutter and Richard Henwood, were arrested near the town.
They actually got bogged outside of Tennant Creek, and a resident actually came across them. They were sunburnt, dehydrated. He gave them a lift to another location outside of Tennant Creek, then realised when he came into Tennant Creek they were the absconders because he saw it on social media.
Police were then alerted and the men were arrested as a result. The trio are now all behind bars. Evening, Isaac Maruzi with ABC News. A 25-year-old man is tonight behind bars after allegedly grabbing an 8-year-old girl in her front yard in Anula in Darwin's northern suburbs. Police say the young girl fought off the would-be attacker and managed to sound the alarm.
A family-friendly Darwin suburb, the scene of every parent's worst nightmare.
At about 4:30 yesterday, an 8-year-old girl was in her front yard and an unknown person, not known to the resident, entered the yard and grabbed the young girl.
Police say the child managed to escape the alleged assault.
She fought him off bravely, a tremendous effort, and made the residents of that place alerted to her intervention, and then the male ran away, jumped some fences, and the residents chased him.
They managed to catch the man and pin him down, with police arriving soon after to take him into custody. While it's been the best case outcome, the horrific situation has rattled those who live and work in the area.
Petrifying. You can't even let your child play in the front yard without someone trying to attack them.
I've never heard or seen such a thing, so it's shocking for me as well.
I've never ever heard of anything like that around here before.
It was here along McMillan's Road, one of the main thoroughfares of the northern suburbs, that the alleged incident took place. Police are now calling for anyone who may have seen anything unusual or who may have dash cam footage from the time of the incident to come forward. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
The Northern Territory's Police Minister says the government's meeting the challenge of the mass departure of officers as high attrition rates continue to plague the force. She's promised more officers than ever before, but the record $510 million budget hasn't been welcomed by all.
With the budget less than a week away, politicians have begun spruiking record investments. Today, the Police Minister's turn.
It means more boots on the ground, more police out there, more Aboriginal community police officers, more Aboriginal liaison officers.
At a time of high attrition, with senior police leaving the force, the government's still promising there'll be more officers than ever before.
We are absolutely recruiting and going past that attrition rate, so we are meeting those challenges.
The police union welcomed extra boots on the ground, but they're calling for more mental health support for officers after 3 took their lives in recent months.
We need to shake the stigma attached to mental health and make sure that people have a safe place and feel confident and have confidence that they can come forward.
The record budget will see 21 more remote police officers and 30 new Aboriginal liaison officers. But the funding hasn't been welcomed by all. Elders from the community of Yundamu, where a young man was killed by NT police officer Zachary Rolfe in 2019, have demanded guns be removed from communities and police funding be redirected into community-controlled alternatives. In a statement, the community made 16 demands, including that Constable Rolfe face a retrial and customary law. The officer was found not guilty of murder earlier this year. The government is yet to respond. The Police Commissioner now facing pressure from outside and within the force, with officers who support Constable Rolfe angry over the Commissioner's handling of the incident.
Well, I understand 3 regions across the Territory have attempted to move a motion. I can't actually ascertain the fact in that. There's no foundation of law to support a no confidence motion. The Police Commissioner has my full confidence.
I don't think you've ever seen a Northern Territory Police Commissioner that hasn't come under some level of scrutiny at times because it is a really difficult job and they have to make tough decisions, and they're not always popular decisions.
Some decisions unpopular on all sides. Nicholas Hines, ABC News.
And if you or someone you know needs help, please phone Beyond Blue or visit their website. If you're experiencing distress, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14. After weeks of violent unrest in the remote NT community of Wadeye, hundreds of community members remain displaced from their homes, some still fearing for their safety. A Territory Senator has described it as a humanitarian situation, as the NT government works with traditional owners to decide what to do next. Matt Garrick reports.
Homes smashed to bits amid weeks of violent unrest have left an NT community in a state of shock.
Absolute despair, sadness, great deal of sadness. As I walked around Wadeye itself, I'd hear from people who would go past me and just say, yeah, I'm really sad for my country.
The violence in Wadeye between rival families escalated after a 32-year-old man was killed and an 18-year-old man charged with manslaughter. Dozens of homes have been damaged and many of those destroyed. Police say unrest has calmed in recent days, but hundreds of people who left their homes during the violence remain displaced, living in bush camps and homelands outside the community.
To speak to all the traditional owners out there and the different clan groups, how probably the feeling of hopelessness they have by losing all their belongings, and they want harmony, they want peace.
Those families, those women and children who had, at that time when I was out there, no accommodation, no toiletry, sanitation, and very, very little food, if any.
Traditional owners have been calling for change, and the NT government says discussions are underway to decide what should happen with those currently displaced from their homes.
There's a lot of grieving. There is a lot of sorrow on the ground, and frankly, there are still some people who do not feel safe. So we're working with all these different family groups to try to bring life back to Wadeye to as normal as possible.
Police say some people may have to remain in their makeshift camps for months while home repairs take place and mediation is undertaken to try to settle the ongoing tensions. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
The crime crisis in Alice Springs reached a new peak overnight, with police warning residents to avoid the CBD as out-of-control youths in stolen cars ran rampant. This latest crime spree has fuelled calls for a curfew, with the police minister warning some youths in Alice Springs could be removed from their families as part of a government intervention.
This was the moment police brought a dangerous Alice Springs crime spree to a dramatic end.
Stop! Police, stop! Stop!
It followed a police alert like no other. Alice Springs residents warned not to enter the CBD overnight as a group of children aged 11 to 13 rampaged through the streets in stolen vehicles. Officers were forced to pull back, fearing for their lives.
They were quite dangerous in their driving and targeted behaviours, particularly at police, marked and unmarked police cars and our officers on foot.
Earlier in the night, the ABC building was targeted, with the office ransacked and a vehicle stolen. The car eventually recovered, police spikes putting a stop to the joyride. One of the offenders is facing charges, and police say the other 4 will be dealt with under the Youth Justice Act. But some say that's not good enough.
This community is being run by 30 to 40 youths that run rampage on our street every single night.
It's not an isolated incident. In the past week alone, multiple businesses have been targeted by young offenders.
And residents say it's no longer a crime crisis, it's an emergency.
These kids are living a real-life Grand Theft Auto game, and it's on the streets of Alice Springs. And sooner or later, something drastic will happen and someone will die.
The Territory Families Minister and the Police Minister needs to make a choice. Back our police and bring in laws that actually deal with these young offenders, or simply allow what happened last night to continue happening.
The Territory Government now planning an intervention to get vulnerable young people off the streets.
And we are working with police around the right decision-making process for them, about at which point they would take those young people and not return them home.
The latest crime data shows property offences have almost doubled in Alice Springs since 2018, with nearly 8,000 offences in the 12 months to August 2022. These include actual and attempted house and commercial break-ins, property damage and motor vehicle and other theft. That's fueling calls for a curfew in Alice Springs to keep children off the streets, while others say more young offenders should be sent to youth detention.
This is criminal behaviour and should be treated as such.
But those in the youth justice space say research shows curfews and youth detention won't break cycles of crime. They say youth diversion is the answer if it's funded properly.
Remote diversion is sporadic and non-existent in a lot of cases, so anybody that's living outside of Alice Springs doesn't have the option really.
For residents, a new approach can't come soon enough. Charmaine Allison, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Good evening, Alexandra Alvaro with ABC News. Abhorrent, disturbing and reckless. That's been some of the reaction to a ram raid targeting police in Katherine overnight. Locals say crime has escalated in recent months and are calling on the Territory Government to do more. Eleni Roussos reports.
A brazen late-night attack on police that's left a community rattled. It was a close call for the 5 police officers standing just metres away, and for this local who captured the carnage on her phone.
Holy hell. Me.
A panicked rush took hold of Katherine's town centre as police tried to bring a stolen ute and troopy under control.
Thankfully, the police officers weren't in any of the vehicles at the time of the ramming, the deliberate and reckless act of ramming our police vehicles.
So far, a 14-year-old and 2 16-year-olds are in custody. All 3 are known to police.
Those sorts of behaviours are unacceptable and we need to be protecting our police in order for them to protect the community.
It wasn't just police who were targeted. A furniture business was smashed into and the turf at the local golf course was also damaged.
We keep making excuses about this, but the reality is it's gone too far. What we're doing is not working.
It's not just Katherine feeling the impact of youth crime. Just last week, a crime spree made headlines further south in Alice Springs.
The Territory are crying out for action, and it's time for Labor government to do something about this crime right across the Northern Territory.
Police statistics show house break-ins and property damage in Katherine is at a 5-year high. Commercial break-ins are also the highest they've been in 2 years.
This is not the whole community. This is a small group that have escalated quite quickly, and I have every confidence that the police and Territory families, knowing those families, are absolutely on this matter.
Long-term residents say more needs to be done.
This behaviour is starting to build up anxiety in people that wasn't there 6 months ago.
An anxiety that's being felt right across the Northern Territory. Eleni Roussos, ABC News.
Good evening, Eleni Roussos with ABC News. The fallout from the fatal stabbing of 20-year-old Declan Laverty at a Darwin bottle shop has triggered a raft of new measures to protect public safety. It's been revealed the 19-year-old who allegedly stabbed the young man to death was out on bail at the time, prompting the Northern Territory Government to review bail laws and increase police powers.
Holding back tears, Declan Laverty's father recounts the moment he got the news no dad should ever have to hear.
Paramedic met me and I explained who I was, and he explained that Declan had passed, and I actually thought I was on top of myself. I know that sounds silly, I just wasn't there.
It wasn't the first time Declan faced violence at work.
He had a screwdriver held him a month or so ago, verbal, physical attacks.
The tragic death sending shockwaves through the hospitality industry.
There's still a lot of hurt out there, a lot of anger and a lot of frustration.
The 19-year-old charged over Declan's death was on bail for a previous alleged aggravated assault at the time, prompting a new review of bail laws.
This is particularly around the presumption for or against bail around edge weapons.
Under the proposed changes, NT Police would also have more powers under the Weapons Control Act.
It will allow police to stop, search, detain and seize anyone suspected of carrying edged weapons, or weapons for that matter.
Other measures include the immediate review of penalties for weapon offences, taxpayer-funded security guards at bottle shops for 3 months, de-escalation training for retail workers and an increased police presence at late-night venues. Despite previous concerns raised about police resources, the Deputy Commissioner says staffing won't be an issue.
We've got lots of cops. We've got more cops than we've ever had. We're above attrition.
The opposition says the government's new measures are too little too late.
It does nothing to make people safer today. It won't make anyone safer tomorrow, in a week or even in a month.
After 2 days of closures, BWS stores reopened today. The pressure now on authorities to ensure every staff member who goes to work returns home safely. Jessica Rendell, ABC News.
Dr. Lee there. Well, the Northern Territory Government has announced a review of bail laws and a possible expansion of police powers after the stabbing death of a bottle shop worker in Darwin over the weekend. The Northern Territory Chief Minister believes the suite of measures under review will help target criminals across the region.
A solemn announcement from a Chief Minister under increasing pressure.
Enough is enough. This behaviour has to stop.
Grief is turning to anger in Darwin, where the stabbing death of 20-year-old bottle shop worker Declan Laverty on Sunday night has gripped the community.
It is white hot out there, no doubt about it. I think today, though, we do need to send a strong message that we need to get back on top of safety.
When we look at the call centre, the Joint Emergency Services call centre, in 10 years ago they got 12,000 calls in a month. This month we've got 35,000.
The escalation of crime in the Northern Territory has stretched resources across all frontline services. Today, the Chief Minister announced a suite of measures she says will restore order.
This work will commence immediately and it will review the bail laws for offences involving a weapon, including the presumption for and against bail for such offences.
Under the measures, government will work to introduce government-funded crowd controllers at bottle shops, conduct a work-safe audit of all late-night venues, arm transit officers with capsicum spray and dramatically increase police powers.
It will allow police to stop, search, detain and seize anyone suspected of carrying edged weapons, or weapons for that matter.
Indigenous leaders are concerned these proposed powers could unfairly target Aboriginal people and drive up incarceration rates.
We need the solutions to be resourced and focused on the community, focused outside of simply locking people up, which we know doesn't work.
Any impact on incarceration rates will need to be monitored, with the Northern Territory Police saying jails are so full they're having to manage prisoners in policing facilities. Letitia Lemke, SBS World News.
All right, I want to move now to the Northern Territory. Beleaguered Police Chief Jamie Chalker has been asked to resign as the NT Police Chief by the government, bringing an end to a tenure that's been plagued by controversy. Now, Chalker took the top job back in 2019, 2 days after Constable Zachary Rolfe fatally shot Kumanjai Walker during a botched arrest attempt. Rolfe was charged with Walker's murder, you'll remember that, in November that year, but found not guilty by a jury early last year. Chalker's decision to charge Constable Rolfe quickly angered many in the NT police force. 80% of officers in a recent survey rating police morale as low or very low. And of course, Chalker has been also leading the police through a pretty tumultuous period of rising crime and violence, not just, of course, in Alice, but across the Territory. And he's seen by many to have lost control of the situation. Joining me now, Matt Cunningham, Sky's Northern Australia correspondent. Matt, as I said, tumultuous tenure for Jamie Chalker. What's been the reaction to the news he's been asked to resign? Will he resign? And how much responsibility is he being asked to take here for politicians over this spike in violence?
Well, they're all very good questions, Peter, and it's more than 2 days now since we first reported that the government had asked Jamie Chalker to resign, telling him that they'd lost confidence in him. And yet we're still in this stalemate position. The Chief Minister, Natasha Fyles, gave a fairly extraordinary news conference today where she was asked by journalists several times whether A, she had asked Jamie Chalker to resign, and whether B, she still had confidence in Jamie Chalker, and we couldn't get a straight answer. All she would say was that Jamie Chalker was on leave, that his deputy Michael Murphy has now been put into the acting position, but no word from the Chief Minister as to whether she still had confidence in Jamie Chalker. Of course, we know that that means that she and her government no longer have confidence in Jamie Chalker, otherwise she would have come out and said so. But there is this ridiculous situation that's going on now. It would appear that Jamie Chalker, even though the government has asked him to resign, it appears that he doesn't appear too keen to actually do so. So a really difficult situation, an embarrassing situation, you'd have to say, for the government now. It's locked in basically a war with its own police commissioner, while we're seeing people attacked with axes on the streets of Darwin and kids stealing cars in Alice Springs and driving them around dangerously in the middle of the night. It's just a catastrophe all round, you'd have to say.
I want to come back and ask you about Zach Rolfe, because I know you've got an update, but this Tomahawk thing you just mentioned there, this violent fight in pretty much the middle of the day, a brawl between two men, a suburban street turned into a bit of a war zone. Well, what's happened here?
So my understanding, I was out there this morning, is that these are groups, different clan groups from the community of Wadair. I actually spoke to one of the people today who was involved in the incident in that street, a man who says that he had an axe held to his throat during that incident. Now, there has been clan violence that's been going on in Wadair and the nearby community of Pepperminardi for more than 12 months, probably for the past 18 months. We've had politicians, including Labor's Malandiri McCarthy, describe the situation there as a humanitarian crisis. People have been displaced from that community because of the fighting that's been going on. There's been more than 100 houses at Wadair that have either been damaged or destroyed. And we have seen in the past few months a lot of people from that community coming in to Darwin. Now, I think what you saw on the streets of the Darwin suburb of Moyle on Friday afternoon was that violence spilling onto the streets of Darwin. The man I spoke to, he said he was from Wadair. He said the man who attacked him was from Wadair as well. And then, of course, you have the poor woman who lives in the unit nearby, who's filmed this on her mobile phone and posted it on social media, who's absolutely traumatised by the events that are going on right literally underneath her balcony. And she has also said that she's been subjected to retribution after she posted that footage on social media. So, you know, that's a fairly extraordinary situation there. And also another example of the escalating issues of violent crime we're seeing on the streets, not just of Darwin, but elsewhere in the Northern Territory as well.
And I might remind my viewers, of course, this standoff between the Chief Minister and the Chief of Police is the worst possible time for something like this. Just quickly, Zach Rolfe, what can you tell us?
So my understanding is that Zachary Rolfe's lawyers were sent a letter last week basically indicating that the Northern Territory Police intends to terminate his position. Now, it doesn't relate to the shooting of Kumanjai Walker that you mentioned at the top of the show. We know he was charged with murder over that incident 2 days after Jamie Chalker started in the role of Police Commissioner, but we know that he was found not guilty on all three charges he faced in relation to that incident early last year. This relates to a 2,500-word open letter attributed to Constable Rolfe that was posted on Facebook in February, picked up by a lot of media outlets subsequently, where he basically complained about the way he'd been treated by the top brass of the Northern Territory Police Force and the judicial system here in the Northern Territory, and also justified some of those text messages that have come out during the coronial inquest. So my understanding is that his lawyers have been asked to show why he shouldn't be dismissed. Otherwise, Zachary Rolfe will be terminated from the Northern Territory Police Force.
We'll stay across that. I know you will, Matt Cunningham. Thank you.
The Northern Territory Police Association is calling on the government to urgently clarify the future of Police Commissioner Jamie Chalker. On Saturday, Sky News revealed the government had asked Mr Chalker to resign after losing confidence in him. Matt Cunningham broke that story. He joins us live from Darwin now. Matt, what's been the response from government? It's kind of weird.
It certainly is. I think it's more what they're not saying rather than what they are that is giving you an indication of what's going on here. But as you were saying in your introduction, the Northern Territory Police Association calling on the government to come clean on exactly what is going on here. It is now more than 3 days since we first broke that news that the government had asked Jamie Chalker to resign because it no longer had confidence in him. But the government is still putting out pretty bland statements simply saying that the Commissioner is on leave, but not saying any more. Natasha Fyles was asked 11 times during a press conference yesterday whether she had confidence in Jamie Chalker, whether she had asked him to resign. Here's some of the responses she gave to those questions.
Does Jamie Chalker have your confidence?
So the Police Commissioner is on leave and Deputy Commissioner Michael Murphy is acting and the Police Service have been advised of that.
Do you understand that when you're asked the question Kathleen asked before about whether you have confidence in the Police Commissioner, when you say anything other than yes, the message to the community is that no, you don't have confidence in that Police Commissioner?
If there's no other questions on other topics, I will thank you for your time and conclude the press conference.
Laura, I'm joined now by the Opposition Leader, Leah Finocchiaro. Leah, we were just hearing the Chief Minister there refusing to answer questions about whether the government has confidence in the Police Commissioner. What do you think needs to happen today?
Well, I think this shows Natasha Fyles is running a circus, not a government. She needs to clarify immediately for the sake of our police force and the Territory on what his status is. We have a crime crisis plaguing the Territory and a police crisis, Matt, and for the government to pretend like something isn't going on here isn't good enough.
Do you have confidence in the Police Commissioner? Do you think he should continue in his role?
Well, what we've tried to do on 6 occasions is call an inquiry into the police crisis, and the very first thing that inquiry would have done is call Police Commissioner Jamie Chalker forward and ask him why he should keep his job. That clearly hasn't happened. So the question really sits with the Chief Minister around what is the status of our Police Commissioner and whether or not he's coming back. This needs to be cleared up as a matter of urgency.
We've had reports at Sky News that there are between 400 and 600 police officers calling in sick during any one pay period. Wasn't the government right to act to move Jamie Chalker on, given the morale crisis we're seeing within the Northern Territory Police?
Well, we have several crises in our police force. One is around morale, attrition. We have 11% of our police leaving the force every single year. We know health and wellbeing is a major issue, and yet Natasha Fyles and her government are failing to tackle this issue head on. Now, if they have asked Jamie Chalker to leave as Police Commissioner, they need to own that decision and come forwards, make sure the police force understand what that transition plan looks like and let the community know. But ultimately, burying their head in the sand is not creating confidence for our police or the community who want this crime crisis tackled head on.
Well, Laura, a bit of a crisis, as you can see, in the Northern Territory. Still no firm answer from the government at the moment, though, as to the future of Jamie Chalker.
Matt, thanks so much.
Northern Territory Chief Minister Natasha Fyles continues to avoid questions about the future of Police Commissioner Jamie Chalker. She's refusing to say if she had confidence in Mr Chalker after Sky News reported she had asked him to resign.
A new day and a new answer.
I have full confidence in the Northern Territory Police Force and the leadership under Michael Murphy.
But that wasn't the question. Natasha Fyles had been asked if she had confidence in Police Commissioner Jamie Chalker. 5 days after Sky News first revealed the government had asked Mr Chalker to resign, it's a question she continues to dodge. Do you have confidence in Jamie Chalker as the Police Commissioner?
I have confidence in the Northern Territory Police Force, and I won't be making comments publicly whilst there is private, confidential conversations around Commissioner Chalker's heading towards the end of the tenure, towards the end of the year, and that contract.
It's very clear that Natasha Fyles no longer has confidence in Jamie Chalker.
Police say Mr Chalker is on planned leave until April 18, but he's not expected back at work. on the 19th of April, who will be the Commissioner of Police?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals or comment into the future, but I can absolutely assure Territorians that there is a strong acting Commissioner, someone that has done that role previously, and I will update them if that changes.
The opposition says the government's handling of the matter is a farce.
Natasha Fyles needs to immediately come forward and clear the air around what the status of Jamie Chalker is and what is going on with our police force.
It's not just the opposition expressing frustration at the way the government has managed Mr Chalker's exit. Senior Labor figures have told Sky News they're gobsmacked. The government has allowed the uncertainty to continue, saying it's doing the Chief Minister significant damage. But Natasha Fyles is holding her line. What did you say to him when you met with him on Friday?
I won't go into those details.
Did you ask him to resign?
I won't go into those details, but other to say ahead of his reported tenure ending towards the end of this year, it is appropriate to have those conversations.
Matt Cunningham, Sky News, Darwin.
First, the acting police commissioner has urged the parents of young criminals to dob in their kids before a crime is committed as police investigate another spate of violence in Darwin overnight. Michael Murphy has also flagged major changes on the cards for frontline officers in a bid to bolster the police footprint in major centres.
You can't get in.
It's not exactly the start to her shift this Darwin retailer was expecting.
That's great. I love Darwin.
The bollards outside barely putting a dent in the efforts of Ram Raiders' attempts to get in. Police allege a group of 4 in a stolen car were behind this morning's mess. 2 alleged offenders still outstanding, another 2 13-year-olds arrested. Separately, in Tiwi, police are searching for an intruder who allegedly stabbed a 61-year-old man in the neck with a shovel before stealing his car.
If the mums or the parents or the dads are listening and you know your family's involved in these crime types, make sure you let us know so we can intervene before they commit a crime, before they drive dangerously in a motor vehicle, before they ram raid a premises and destroy someone's business.
The acting police commissioner fronted cameras today addressing the seemingly relentless spate of violence in the territory.
The downward trend across domestic violence, youth disturbances, alcohol-related harm is occurring, but you need to feel and see a change, and you'll get that from the Northern Territory Police.
The acting commissioner also revealed a major change could be on the cards for the front line. In a bid to bolster police numbers in Darwin and Alice Springs, he revealed recruits may no longer be forced to serve 2 years in a remote station.
So I think we need to remain contemporary in our thinking, adjust what the needs are for the community to make sure we provide that service.
The policy of sending everyone out of Darwin had the unintended consequence of a station such as Katherine, Alice Springs having a really high percentage of recruits. And that's not good for when people are still learning their craft and being able to work alongside experienced members.
The change would be a backflip on one of the first announcements made by Jamie Chalker 3 years ago. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
With crime front of mind for Territorians, the country Liberals are again calling for tougher bail laws for violent offenders. But with jails already full, there's concerns keeping more people in prison will make matters worse.
As violent crime continues to burden the Territory, there's another push for stronger bail laws in Parliament.
So far, what Labor has introduced has not gone far enough to provide that safety to the people of the Territory.
Tougher bail measures for offences involving edged weapons were already passed in March.
You say you're committed to bail reform, but your changes were little more than window dressing.
The opposition now wants the presumption of bail removed for all violent offenders, a move that could push the Territory's overflowing prisons to the brink, and one that's been guided by public outcry, the opposition conceding it hasn't consulted experts, the courts or on-the-ground organisations on whether stronger bail laws would actually curb crime.
So there's current existing legislation that's quite effective.
With a force desperate to recruit, a new offer is on the table to entice police to the Territory, $20,000 to relocate, on top of free housing.
We need to remain competitive.
The opposition determined to paint Labor as weak on crime, while their own internal rumblings were forefront of the government's agenda.
In a few weeks, when they have their Central Council meeting, there will absolutely be a motion of no confidence in Leah Finocchiaro as the party leader.
One bill both sides supported, the controversial rollout of capsicum spray to bus transit officers, but not without debate.
Racial profile tells us that it is
First Nations people that will be targeted.
Despite concerns capsicum spray is a punitive measure that shouldn't be in the hands of transit officers, Parliament passed the amendment bill this afternoon, allowing these agents to use the weapon once they're properly trained. Roxanne Fitzgerald, ABC News.
With community concern about crime across the Northern Territory, police have relaunched efforts to build relationships with the general public. A fortnightly Coffee with a Cop event will be held in towns throughout the NT as officers make themselves accessible to the community they serve while battling an ongoing crime crisis.
In Darwin's northern suburbs, cops tend to be on their feet responding to crime. But this morning they were sat for a coffee, the acting commissioner shouting hot drinks for Karama residents.
It's about being available, it's about being here to listen to concerns and actually care about the people and the residents of the Northern Territory.
5 years after the initiative first kicked off, fortnightly Coffee with a Cop meetings were today relaunched across the NT. As the community grapples with concerning crime rates, the men and women in blue say they're all ears.
Bit of positive, bit of negative. They also suggested that we could come a bit later and see what it's really like.
Crime really concerns people, unlawful entries, property crime, hooning, antisocial behaviour, public drinking and being able to see police in the area.
But it hasn't all been caffeine and catch-ups. Police today searching for a man who allegedly stabbed another overnight in Nightcliff.
Presentation of any weapons and assaults is really concerning, particularly around edge weapons, knives, scissors, any type of scenarios.
Meanwhile, a 3-day road policing blitz has come to an end with 400 litres of wine seized and destroyed before it hit the black market in Alice Springs.
On the secondary supply market can go anywhere from $100 to $150 for a 5-litre cask.
2 people are expected to be charged.
Sky News can reveal a confidential disclosure about police corruption made by Northern Territory Children's Commissioner Colleen Gwynn was handed over to New Northern Territory Police before they began investigating her over allegations of abuse of office. Police have refused to say whether the disclosure influenced their decision to run a 3-year investigation into Ms Gwynn.
It's 3 months since Children's Commissioner Colleen Gwynn had abuse of office charges laid against her thrown out of the Northern Territory Supreme Court. But questions continue to mount about why police and the DPP pursued the former police officer for 3 years over allegations she tried to appoint her friend as her assistant commissioner.
At no stage have I ever been interviewed by investigators. Key witnesses who would have demonstrated my innocence were never spoken to.
Sky News can now reveal a confidential disclosure Ms Gwynn made about potential police corruption to the Office of the Public Interest Disclosure Commissioner was leaked back to the NT Police in the months before they began investigating her. Details of the leak are contained in a chronology of events prepared for Ms Gwynn's lawyers based on her contemporaneous notes. Meeting with Solicitor General Sonia Brownhill regarding whistleblower disclosure from historical PID matter. Concerns an interview I did with PID relating to potential corruption in police. Police investigating another matter were in possession of the transcript of my interview. I received an apology from SG on behalf of the previous Information Commissioner. Brenda Monaghan, who was the Public Interest Disclosure Commissioner when Ms Gwynn gave the interview, said she was unable to discuss the issue. Sonia Brownhill, who's now a Supreme Court judge, also said she was unable to comment. We also sent a series of questions to police last Thursday, but a week later, and despite several subsequent requests, we've received no response. Government ministers have also dodged our questions.
So, Matt, can I just stop you just for a moment? I have a fully disclosed written disclosure on with Colleen, a conflict of interest. I can't talk about any matters to do with Colleen.
Meanwhile, 3 months after she was found not guilty, Ms Gwynn remains on leave.
The humiliation and victimisation to which I've been subjected merely for doing my job is something that I had to endure in silence.
Matt Cunningham, Sky News, Darwin.
Meanwhile, the Northern Territory's acting top cop says levels of domestic and family violence are overwhelming the force. The Territory's Emergency Communications Centre received 95 domestic violence calls to 000 alone overnight. Acting Police Commissioner Michael Murphy says the majority of calls are coming from less resourced areas of the Northern Territory, including the Central and Northern Belt. This month, a series of inquests into the domestic violence deaths of 4 Indigenous women heard NT domestic violence rates have more than doubled in a decade.
We overnight saw 95 reports of domestic incidents into our emergency communication centre, which is quite extraordinary. So 83 the night before and about 76 the night before. It's actually overwhelming.
Good evening, Eleni Roussos with ABC News. Northern Territory Police will likely soon have new powers to scan members of the public for edged weapons under new laws to be brought into Territory Parliament on urgency this week. It comes as the NT Government releases its bail review, triggered after the stabbing death of a young bottle shop worker, which recommends no changes be made to bail laws.
Stand and be scanned. The introduction of wanding to search people for knives in places like public transport could pass Parliament as soon as tomorrow.
It's not okay to carry weapons around. It's not normal to have a knife in your pocket, and so these wanding powers are a deterrent.
Wanding, a process of waving a scanning stick over people's bodies, is already legal in Queensland, with NT officials saying after a rise in knife crime, they're taking that state's example on board.
This tool will give us the ability to look at high-risk areas and other declared areas, including transport routes, to engage with the public, educate them on what we're doing, and then do a non-invasive search to detect if they have any weapons.
The introduction of wanding comes as a review into bail laws launched after the stabbing death of bottle shop worker Declan Laverty in March is handed down. It calls for no further changes to the Bail Act.
What it shows is that the Northern Territory has comprehensive and wide-reaching bail legislation as it stands.
Thousands gathered outside Parliament earlier this year following Mr Laverty's death, calling for tougher crime measures to be introduced. The government pledges it's acted on those concerns.
We continue to respond with an evidence-based approach, and that's what we will continue to do.
The community expected far more from government to make sure that they were protected and kept safe.
Although the bail laws won't change off the back of this review, the ministers say they'll be making changes to bail accommodation and offering more training to judges and prosecutors about the dangers of letting offenders charged with weapons offences out on bail. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
The Northern Territory Police Association says its officers are overwhelmed by rising rates of crime and a lack of resources. President Nathan Finn has told Sky News failed government policies have increased the workload for officers who are already struggling to cope.
A police force at breaking point.
We're actually 200 members short. That's each and every day. That was yesterday.
As crime rates rise across the Northern Territory, the police union says its officers can't keep up. President Nathan Finn says the demands of the job are taking their toll.
The support's not there for them, and that's the sad fact is their members are contacting us daily saying they're not being supported in the workplace.
A Northern Territory Police Association survey in February found 85% of officers had considered resigning in the previous 12 months.
We've been very active in recruiting police and also retaining the hard-working police that we've got.
Even as the government announced a new plan to activate Darwin's CBD, it was forced to field questions about one of the city's best-known restaurants shutting its doors due to crime.
In regards to the Char restaurant, we have reached out to them to make them aware of the programs that are available to support businesses.
I've been saying that one for a long time. We need more people on the streets, not necessarily more police. We need more police on the streets.
The Police Association has criticised government policies it says have increased the burden on police officers. It says the decision last year to lift alcohol bans in Aboriginal town camps had a devastating effect. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese flew to Alice Springs in January and insisted the bans be reinstated. The NT government says it could allow the grog to return.
So there is a pathway for community if they wish to see takeaway alcohol, and it also has to have mechanisms that will keep them safe if we start to see any harm-related statistics increase.
They need to look at themselves seriously. If they can even consider that, they're clearly not listening to the members on the ground, the health people at their hospitals that are running their health. The representations are down because of the alcohol restrictions.
Matt Cunningham, Sky News. Darwin.
Good evening, Eleni Broussos with ABC News. After months of uncertainty, the Northern Territory's new top cop has been announced, with long-term Territory Police Officer Michael Murphy taking on the role full-time. The new Commissioner says stamping out domestic violence will be a key focus, and he'll also oversee a wide-reaching new review of police resources.
A familiar face of the Territory Force, Michael Murphy reflects on his long journey to the top.
So you never forget where you came from. You never forget what you've learnt. You never forget about your connections with the workforce.
A Territory cop since 1997, Michael Murphy's worked his way through the ranks, from constable to today announced as Commissioner, and knows more than most the challenges and traumas those on the front line are dealing with day to day.
It's been an incredibly tumultuous 3 years on the back of COVID and some of the challenges coming out of COVID and increased demands across all areas.
He takes over during a year where crime and a coronial inquest into police use of force have dominated headlines, and he's aware great challenges lie ahead.
We really need to sharpen the focus in the crime types for a safer Territory and looking after Territorians, particularly across the scourge of domestic violence.
The announcement comes in the wake of a legal battle between the NT government and his predecessor Jamie Chalker that brought deep uncertainty to NT Police for months.
Today does mark that line in the sand, and we are able to go forward with that stability.
The government also announced today a major review into police resources to work out ways to better support those on the front line. Both major parties saying they'll implement the outcomes.
We will publicly release the review. We'll publicly release its recommendations.
The review into policing needs to be independent, and if it is, we will be implementing the review in full.
Making strides towards a new era in Territory policing. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
The US military has confirmed 3 people have been killed in an aircraft crash north of Darwin. 23 American Marines were on board a V-22 Osprey when it went down this morning during a military exercise. Another 5 people are injured.
An emergency operation to retrieve American Marines in the Northern Territory after their aircraft crashed. 3 have been killed.
A regrettable incident. I'm unable to give further information at this time.
23 Marines were on board a V-22 Osprey when the military aircraft ran into trouble on the Tiwi Islands north of Darwin. Many are injured, 5 seriously.
1 patient is in Royal Darwin Hospital in theatre being operated on presently. 4 more patients are in Royal Darwin Hospital. We have more arriving as we speak.
They were taking part in the military training exercise Predators Run. The Australian Army partners with United States Marines and forces from Indonesia, the Philippines and Timor-Leste. This is the 2nd fatal accident in a military training exercise in Australia in a month. The lives of 4 Australian soldiers were lost during exercise Talisman Sabre. Their Taipan helicopter crashed into water off the Queensland coast. That exercise also included the United States.
The Australian Defence Force are cooperating with our friends in the United States Defence Force to make sure that we provide every assistance possible.
We're working as fast as we can within medical advice to make sure patients are stable to travel.
All Marines will be transported to Darwin. The extent of their injuries remains unclear. Ashley Raper for 10 News First.
Firefighters are using breathing apparatus to peel through the smoking wreck of that US military aircraft which crashed north of Darwin, killing 3 Marines. Another 8 remain in hospital. 1 is still critical. President Biden paying tribute tonight to those who won't come home.
The Ospreys are grounded at Darwin Airport. There is a gap where 1 is missing. Its wreckage remains under guard in rugged bushland 90 kilometres north of the capital.
The priority is the recovery of the 3 Marines with dignity.
20 Marines survived. 8 remain in Darwin Hospital and they were visited by comrades today.
There is 1 patient in the ICU and the other patients are receiving care in the normal wards.
But the bodies of 3 airmen remain where the hybrid aircraft plummeted yesterday.
I would just like to reassure the families who are on the other side of the world that we're caring for your loved ones.
2,500 US Marines are stationed here at Robertson Barracks, taking part in Predators Run war games with Australia, East Timor, Indonesia and the Philippines. Only last month, it was the US helping us retrieve 4 Australian airmen killed in a crash in far north Queensland.
They are good friends. We have no closer allies than the United States.
They're family to us, and this is a very significant event.
Echoed by the US President, Jill and I send our deepest condolences to the families of the Marines who lost their lives in this deadly crash. We are praying for those who also suffered injuries.
All Americans are grateful, the doctors, nurses, and staff of the Royal Darwin Hospital, who are caring for our Marines as if they were their own.
It is also felt spiritually on the Tiwi Islands. Patricia is an elder here.
Very sad. We never had this accident.
This rugged terrain here on isolated Melville Island is just the latest setting in a string of disasters right across the globe involving Osprey aircraft. Like its namesake, the predatory bird, it is fast and it's versatile, but it's also troubled. It's happened here before. 3 killed off Queensland when an Osprey clipped a transport ship in 2017. In 2000, 19 dead running drills in Arizona. Last year, 4 killed in Norway during NATO manoeuvres, then another deadly accident in California, now this.
It's an incredibly complex piece of equipment. Remarkable engineering. Like all engineering, things go wrong.
Is it pilot error? Is it mechanical? We just don't know at this moment.
Historically, problems engaging the Osprey's clutch have brought about engine failure. A pilot we spoke with today said he would not step foot in one.
Let's go to Robert Ovadia now at Royal Darwin Hospital. Rob, do you know any more about the 3 Marines who lost their lives?
Oh, Mark, well, we don't yet, but I suspect we will know soon. Right now, the US military is continuing the process of informing loved ones and next of kin overseas. And after that, the tradition, I guess, is to release names, photos in uniform, biographies as well, ranks, and maybe even some tributes. It is a very tough time for the Marines here. A reminder not only that death can occur, but also that it can occur in peacetime. And they really can't catch their breath. The operation here continues, albeit only on land.
Robert Ovadia with the latest from Darwin.
We have been told the complex mission to recover evidence from the downed US military plane in the Northern Territory will take at least 10 days, a task being made all the more difficult with the remote location of the crash site. Investigators still have few clues as to why the MV-22 Osprey crashed just minutes into flight, while authorities in the US are now forced to deliver the devastating news to 3 families that a routine training exercise turned deadly.
US Marines at Darwin Hospital visiting their injured mates. 8 are still undergoing care, 1 in critical condition as the rescue mission turns to a recovery operation.
The remains of the 3 Marines are at the crash site. They have not been moved at this stage.
It is now in the hands of police and investigators. The MV-22 Osprey crashing just minutes after taking off. Its Mayday call sent by a nearby aircraft.
We are just declaring an emergency on behalf of dump truck 11 flight, single MV-22 in the vicinity of Melville Island. Roger, search and rescue is on the way. Requesting you remain in the area and pass any additional details as they come in, please. There is a significant fire in the vicinity of the crash site. Looks like it is not spreading.
The location is difficult, thick terrain and poor mobile communications, but all resources that are being sent to the island.
This recovery and investigation will be prolonged, enduring and complex.
They are a part of our community, so I want to stress to those families that may be watching this on the other side of the world that we're doing everything we can to support their loved ones.
And at a time like this, we reach out to our American brothers and sisters.
The Osprey aircraft has a checkered history, with 52 people killed as a result of crashes, the highest toll in 2000 when 19 Marines were killed during a training exercise in Arizona. 3 died as a result of this crash off the Queensland coast in 2017. And last year, 9 service members were killed during 2 separate incidents, one in Norway during a NATO training exercise, the other in a crash near the California-Arizona border, where investigators found issues with the aircraft's clutch.
Certainly, investigators would be looking at that gearbox issue. This is a complicated piece of equipment.
The aircraft, seen here demonstrating its capabilities at the Gold Coast Air Show only last week, has been a strength for US forces, but at an extreme cost.
The ability to take troops in and out of locations in a tactical environment is without peer. But I guess the question the US will be asking is, do we put capability ahead of lives?
Despite this crash, the multi-country defence exercise known as Predator's Run will not be halted, investigators confirming it would resume. For now, it won't return to the Tiwi Islands, but be focused here on the mainland.
They're really important. These are the exercises which ensure that our defence forces are match fit, and we do not have a capable defence force unless we engage in exercises of this kind.
We pray for those who have lost so much. We recommit ourselves to their ideals and do everything we can for those we love.
The ultimate cost as tensions in our region only rise.
Let's bring in Samara Gardner now, who's live at Darwin Hospital, where the injured have been taken. Samara, no doubt this will be prolonged and, as we mentioned, highly complex investigation into this tragedy.
Sandra, that's right. It's going to take a considerable amount of time. We've heard from investigators that they're expecting and planning to remain on Melville Island, where this accident happened, for more than a week. The Tiwi Islands are only about 60 kilometres from where we are here on the mainland, but where this crash has happened, it's a very dense and difficult terrain to access. So much so, when the accident happened and emergency services were notified, it was actually locals, residents and workers at nearby medical clinics that rushed to help the injured. They were there with the wounded Marines until they could be airlifted here to Royal Darwin Hospital, where 8 remain tonight. They're still recovering from their traumatic injuries, and it will certainly be a long time for them to heal, Sandra.
Indeed. All right, Samara, thank you.
Good evening, Jessica Rendell with ABC News. Authorities have declared the entire Northern Territory a fire danger area until the end of February. It comes as a large, uncontrolled blaze tears through the Barkly region, stretching emergency resources and forcing the closure of a major highway.
As flames rise up, the Barkly Highway shut down. Flames and thick smoke spreading quickly in tinder dry and windy conditions.
I think the main message is that we do have an active, uncontrolled fire in the Barkly at the moment, and we've got a lot of resources dedicated to watching and providing some assets.
The blaze stretching across more than 7,000 square kilometres of land between the Stewart Highway and the NT-Queensland border. Increased fuel loads across Central Australia, leading authorities to extend the fire danger declaration to include the entire Northern Territory from tomorrow. A move that will require all landholders to obtain permits to burn.
The wind at the moment, we're in probably to the south of the Barkly Highway, and it's a moderate threat, but to the north of the Barkly Highway up towards Rockhampton Station and Bunchilly, it's extreme and leading into catastrophic.
Fireys monitoring conditions closely and working to control the spread as the blaze closes in on surrounding property and livestock.
It's moving towards a couple of cattle stations to the north. My understanding is that they've got a large amount of cattle on those stations at the moment, so we're really concerned about trying to stop it getting to those cattle.
Residents urged to reconsider their travel plans and follow official warnings, with Central Australia's fire season expected to be the worst in 3 years.
We're only just getting started, to be honest. We expect a lot more of these large-scale fires to occur in Central Australia in particular.
Authorities have announced a 24-hour fire ban will now be in place tomorrow for Darwin and Adelaide River, as well as Barkly North and Gregory South East, due to extreme weather forecast. Lee Robinson, ABC News.
An emergency declaration for the Barkly region has been lifted and a watch and act order downgraded as the 2-week-long blaze east of Tennant Creek loses momentum. More than 1.3 million hectares of earth have been scorched, making it one of the largest bushfires the Northern Territory has experienced, and authorities say this is just the start of what will be a very tough fire season.
An historic blaze, one that scorched an area 5 times the size of the ACT, finally easing. But air quality concerns remain, with massive plumes of smoke blanketing the Barkly region south of Darwin.
We've seen catastrophic conditions. We're in extreme conditions at the moment.
An emergency declaration made earlier this week was lifted today, but authorities say firefighters are not yet out of the woods.
So we are seeing conditions moderate, but it is still very serious, and this is just the start of what will be a very tough fire season.
Round-the-clock efforts from firefighters and volunteers are expected to continue, with the Australian Defence Force on hand until the end of the week.
Probably be for another 3 or 4 days before we can actually de-escalate and return the community back to normal.
The origins of the fire remain unknown, with investigators yet to determine whether or not this blaze was deliberately lit.
This fire actually started in 2 locations. It started on the Barkly Highway, and then there was another ignition down at Epinara.
We're lucky no one's lost their life.
Burning through 1.3 million hectares in just 2 weeks, the fire's catastrophic impacts to pastoral properties has left many reeling.
Pastoralists, they have been instrumental in this response.
The blaze even forcing the local football league to cancel their upcoming grand final.
Player safety's our main priority, spectator safety as well. There's a few, issues that could arise around travel with highways being closed.
Disaster assistance is now making its way to the region, with the NT government committing to review the incident and ensure the right resources are in place to deal with future fires of a greater intensity. Roxanne Fitzgerald, ABC News.
As annual statistics show crime is continuing to skyrocket across the Northern Territory, police wanding powers have come into effect this week in the latest attempt to curb violence on Territory streets. For more details on what it all means, I'm joined by reporter Melissa McKay. Mel, what exactly do these wanding powers mean and how have they been used so far?
Well, essentially, Eleni, these are handheld metal detectors being carried by police officers in specific areas of the Territory, like the Darwin CBD, Casuarina, Kurrama, Katherine and in Alice Springs. Police can use these wands to detect whether a person is carrying a weapon, such as a knife or scissors, in a public place and then confiscate them. It started late last week and Police Commissioner Michael Murphy says since then 120 people in Katherine have been wanded, with 3 detected carrying weapons. However, he said 2 of those people had a lawful reason. In Alice Springs, Commissioner Murphy said more than 30 people were checked and 3 youths were found carrying scissors. He said they were dealt with under the Youth Justice Act.
The whole thing, it's about the identification and seizure of dangerous weapons who people don't have a lawful reason to have them. So at the moment, it's really important about the engagement and educating people about why we're there, what we're trying to achieve.
Commissioner Murphy also addressed annual crime statistics today that show an increase in every way that crime is measured across the Territory. We're seeing a 21% increase in assaults, a 26% increase in domestic violence. Sexual assaults are up 24%, house break-ins by 17% and property damage by more than 10%. The Police Commissioner said responding to violent incidents makes up, conservatively, about 80% of police work. And he put a lot of it down to alcohol, particularly grog running in remote communities.
But when we see it actually get into the community, we see lots of fighting and violent fighting and lots of violent conduct where, we saw recently that we need to deploy extra police to arrest a number of people to stem the violence against.
It's something we've heard many times before, Eleni, and something the Police Commissioner says is an ongoing challenge.
Thank you, Mel.
At ceremonies across the country, police officers killed in the line of duty have been honoured on National Police Remembrance Day. In the Northern Territory, serving and former officers marched through the streets to acknowledge their friends and colleagues and take a moment to reflect on the toll the job takes on police and their families.
Through the streets of Darwin's CBD and the centre of Central Australia, men, women and dogs in blue marched in memory of their fallen colleagues. A national day of remembrance honouring the police officers who put their lives on the thin blue line each and every day. Wreaths were laid across the country in memory of those killed over the past 12 months. Several names were today added to the National Honour Roll: Queenslanders Matthew Arnold and Rachel McCrow, and West Australian Anthony Woods, killed in the line of duty, as well as 2 Northern Territory officers who died earlier this year.
We worked through the honour roll, and there's obviously names that some people will remember, and there's some names that are embedded in history and they go back some time. That just shows the rich culture of the Northern Territory Police.
While suicides of Northern Territory officers in recent years was at the centre of Darwin commemorations.
Our police family have been hurting over the last couple of years with the loss due to suicide of a number of their members. We have to sit and pause at different times of the year and actually reflect on that, so we know how important their job is. Our police do an amazing job in very, very challenging circumstances, particularly here in the Northern Territory.
Your well-being, your mindfulness is incredibly important, just as important, if not more so, than your physical well-being.
Police, their families and members of the public gathered to pause and pay their respects.
It's also a time of reflection, I think, for police to just to think about why they've joined the job and you know, they serve and protect the community. It's also a time for the community to say thank you to the men and women of the Northern Territory Police for the sacrifices they've made in serving the community.
Rest in peace, Reverend colleague, for the sun has now set. We will remember.
Melissa McKay, ABC News.
New police powers to scan people for weapons have begun in the Northern Territory, with hundreds already checked by handheld ones and a dozen potential weapons found. The laws were introduced to NT Parliament on urgency earlier this year after a series of stabbing attacks and alleged murders by edged weapons.
A scan, a search and a pair of scissors pulled out of a bag.
It's totally random. If they're in this particular area, which has been declared an authorised area, then anyone within that area can be tested and checked.
Northern Territory Police today put on a display of their new so-called wanding powers at Palmerston Bus Interchange, with passengers scanned and searched for weapons, some supportive of the new measures.
It's overdue, long time overdue.
I reckon it's fair enough because it's for the safety of other people.
It's a good idea, yeah, keep everybody safe.
The new powers, which have just been rolled out, were made into law earlier this year after multiple stabbings, including the alleged murder of bottle shop worker Declan Laverty and of a 51-year-old Aboriginal woman killed outside a Darwin hotel.
We've seen 399 people wanted, with 12 weapons detected. 10 have been seized. Out of that, we've had 6 cautions.
It's a very clear message: don't go armed in public.
Police say the first wanding operations in Alice Springs and Katherine have already turned up numerous pairs of scissors, and this axe at an Alice Springs shopping centre. There's been concerns raised in NT Parliament that the new laws could result in the racial profiling of Aboriginal people. That's a claim that the NT's Police Commissioner has refuted.
There's no racial profiling. We're indiscriminate. We want everyone, kids, adults. We're engaging with everyone.
Even people we're searching are, really appreciative that the police are actually doing something to try and reduce the amount of violent crime that's out there at the moment.
These wands now the new normal, but no magic fix for a crime issue that lingers on. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
Good evening, Jessica Rendell with ABC News. A warning, some viewers may find this first story distressing. Northern Territory Police have confirmed 4 of the 6 people killed in a horror road crash near Pine Creek are believed to be children. Detectives are on a painstaking search to identify the deceased after their 4-wheel drive exploded into a fireball when it crashed head-on with a road train.
Burned and twisted wreckage as the clean-up continues from the Northern Territory's worst road accident in 16 years.
The scene is now rehabilitated, but a very distressing scene. We've never seen anything quite like it.
A four-wheel drive is believed to have swerved into the path of a 3-trailer road train on Friday afternoon, 12 kilometres from the small town of Pine Creek, resulting in a catastrophic fireball which killed 6 people, most of them believed to be children.
It looks like we've got 4 children involved in that vehicle that have sadly passed away. It's very upsetting, it's very distressing.
DNA tests are now underway to try to find their identities.
We assume they're from the Big Rivers region of the Northern Territory. That's yet to be confirmed. But there's going to be people out there that haven't heard from their loved ones. If you haven't heard from your loved ones, please ring us on 131 444.
In nearby Pine Creek, a community comes to grips with the devastation down the road.
It's really bad. We've never had anything like that for as long as I've lived here, and I've been here 14 years.
Everyone, was shaken up, and it was actually busy here because people were stuck. They couldn't go to Catherine, so they came here to get an overnight with us.
Shocking, like we've been out bush for a week, and when we got back into reception we got told about it, and just, devastating, especially with the loss of life.
Yeah, it's really devastating. That's the last thing you'd want, especially on these highways, and these roads are pretty dangerous.
2 men in the truck, who both survived with non-life-threatening injuries, have been commended by police, as have witnesses who arrived at the scene, attempting to save the occupants as their car exploded into an inferno.
We should, commend the people that first stopped on scene and are dealing with, a horrendous blaze and doing what they can. As has been described to us, the intensity of the fire meant that there was nothing that any person there could do to try and save the people.
As an indicator of just how ferocious this blaze was, this pile of ash and rubble behind me was one of the road train's trailers, now completely unrecognisable. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
And if this story has raised issues or caused distress for you, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or via their website.
Advocates say sex workers across Australia are watching as the Northern Territory's progressive anti-discrimination laws are put to the test. A Darwin-based sex worker has begun a legal battle over claims she was unfairly knocked back from applying to join the Territory's police force.
A person shall not discriminate against another person.
From working in New Zealand's sex industry to researching Northern Territory laws, Lisa Lewis has become the face of a workers' rights legal battle.
If you don't represent yourself, who else is going to represent you? Who else is going to stand up for you?
Lisa says when she applied to join NT Police, she was challenged over her unique background and banned from reapplying for 5 years instead of the usual period of 12 months.
In New Zealand, the sex industry is legal. In Northern Territory, the sex industry is legal.
She's the first sex worker to make a formal complaint to the NT's Anti-Discrimination Commission, using new laws passed last year, which explicitly strengthen protections for those who work or have previously worked in the sex industry.
If the case is successful, it'll send a message that sex workers are part of the community, that discrimination against us is unacceptable, and that we are full members of society.
The exact reason why NT Police rejected Ms Lewis's application remains unclear.
We'll just await the decision for the anti-discrimination, and we'll cooperate with the Commissioner about achieving an outcome.
The ABC can confirm there are several other sex workers in the NT who are considering making complaints of their own, but they'd prefer to remain anonymous while the matter unfolds.
Anti-discrimination protections are only as strong as the cases that are successful. So it's really important to sex workers watching this case that it succeeds.
No date has been set for a hearing, but many eyes will be watching, a case with potential far-reaching implications. Samantha Dick, ABC News, Darwin.
Just 1 day into the job, the Territory's new police minister is fending off criticism by the police union that he's a novice who doesn't have the experience to take on the role. Crime has been steadily rising across the Territory for years, but the new police minister pledges he's up for the task of keeping Territorians safe and trying to turn the figures around.
A new police minister addresses new police recruits as both prepare to take their first steps onto the front line.
You can see how eager they are to get out and start policing across the territory, right in time for Christmas.
Just over a year since his elated election, Brent Potter, the member for Darwin's Fanny Bay, was yesterday named as Police Minister in an NT government reshuffle. With it, he inherits rising crime rates and community disillusionment. The NT Police's latest annual report showing less people feel safe at home and more 000 calls are going unanswered. The Police Commissioner acknowledging change is needed.
I'm up to challenging the status quo. We have to do things differently. If we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, we'll go crazy.
With the year's end looming, there's hopes the new minister can move quickly to help towns like Alice Springs avoid a summer crime wave.
I have no doubt that the recent reshuffle of portfolios is the Northern Territory Government's way to make sure that they go into the next year having the most positive outcomes that they can.
After 4 police ministers in 7 years, others are less optimistic about the NT government's ability to turn crime around. The Police Association concerned by the pick of a rookie politician to oversee police.
To give the portfolio, such a serious portfolio, to a junior minister, I don't agree it's the right thing.
He's entitled to represent his members, and if he wasn't doing that, then he's letting them down. He needs to hold me accountable, and I look forward to the challenge in working with him.
Mr Potter will meet with the Police Association tomorrow, the first of many challenges on a long road ahead. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
A motorcyclist has lost his life after a fatal crash in Darwin's rural area. Early this morning, Territory Police received a report of a collision on Finn Road in Waddell. It's alleged the driver of a vehicle attempted an overtake of another vehicle and then collided with the motorcyclist. The male rider died at the scene, with the driver conveyed to Royal Darwin Hospital in a critical condition. The death brings this year's road fatalities in the NT to 26.
So last year we lost 52 Territorians. Even losing 26 people on our roads is unacceptable. We're working hard under the strategy of Towards Zero to reduce road trauma.
The alleged murder in Moyle is now the 4th death police believe to be domestic violence related since the Northern Territory coroner opened an inquiry into domestic, family and sexual violence in June this year. Today, Coroner Elizabeth Armitage opened the final week of evidence in the long-running series of inquests into the deaths of 4 Aboriginal women. Hearing from the National Commissioner for Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence, with the NT's Police Commissioner dropping into court for the first time.
6 months after it began, the Territory's top cop took a front row seat for an inquiry examining his front line.
Just in that 2 hours listening to the insights of the Domestic Violence Commissioner, I learned a lot. And it just realises the importance of the work we've got to do as a police force.
The 2 officers who have sat through the entire inquest have already outlined a series of changes on the horizon for the force, including a co-response between police and DV specialists to be trialled in Alice Springs next year. The Commissioner has committed to rolling it out, but even he admits it's underfunded.
What's funding look like? We need more of it. Is it needs-based, or is it another discussion about, just some more money to give us a co-responder model that works to make a difference to save lives?
The National Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence Commissioner told the coroner co-responder models could be very effective and that it was critical all agencies work together to address domestic violence and its underlying drivers. She said issues such as colonisation, racism, inadequate housing and gender inequality were behind the high rates of domestic violence seen particularly among Indigenous communities. It's compounded in the Northern Territory by geographic disadvantage. Communities are very isolated and have very little support services in those communities. The coroner also heard from Michael Brandenburg this afternoon, a manager at the Tungigia Council's Men's Behaviour Change program in Alice Springs. He reiterated to the coroner that addressing men's decision to use violence against their partners was key to addressing domestic violence as a whole. He also told the coroner a lack of early intervention for young people was a significant and dangerous gap in the system. The inquest continues. Melissa McKay, ABC News, Darwin.
And if you or someone you know needs help, please contact 1800 RESPECT by phone or their website. Extra police and more youth activities. These are some of the plans being initiated for Alice Springs this summer after last year's record-breaking levels of crime and violence. As offending begins to rise once again, not everyone is convinced the additional measures will be enough to keep the community safe.
After a year marked by repeated break-ins, business owner Ben Crawford hopes this summer won't be a repeat.
The last summer was very, very stressful. I got broken into a number of times. The last 18 months we've been done 8 times, and I work for a fire and security company.
The region cast into the national spotlight over surging crime and violence, but authorities are adamant this summer will be different.
We understand the anxiety of the community. We know seasonally the summer period is when we see a rise in crime and antisocial behaviour, and what you can see here is a comprehensive plan to make sure that young people and their families are engaged.
It's about community safety. We're all in this together. We all live here. This is part of our community. It's our community, and we've got to make it a safe place.
The plan includes 50 additional police officers with a focus on alcohol-related offending, youth engagement activities in town and some remote communities, accelerated case management for young offenders and additional return-to-country services. But the NT opposition isn't convinced.
And what the Chief Minister outlined today does not have the residents of Alice Springs feeling any safer today than they did yesterday. And that is an absolute shame.
Either way, another stressful summer for Mr Crawford may be too much to handle.
I've had some times where I've actually wondered what the hell I'm doing. And I love my town and I love being in Central Australia, but I just don't like the current situation that the town is in.
As temperatures rise, only time will tell what the coming months will bring. Lee Robinson, ABC News.
Darwin's bottle shop security guards are next in line to be armed with capsicum spray under the Territory Government's proposed liquor laws. Due to be rushed through Parliament this week, the changes will also see more people added to the banned drinkers register.
The heat is on as summer approaches, with the NT Government set to turn up the temperature on liquor laws.
I know these will cause some disruption to people. It's a bit of a pain. But this is about making sure we protect our community and make the tough decisions to do so.
Sweeping new changes acting on a review of alcohol policy from earlier this year.
And if this means increasing the number of people on the BDR, then that's what we'll do.
Included in the government's proposed changes, a new police power to ban people from drinking for 7 days, to be issued to anyone found acting disorderly or anyone found to be consuming alcohol within 2 kilometres of a licensed premises or anywhere alcohol is banned. In addition, from December, Darwin bottle shops will open from noon for a 6 to 8 week trial period to allow police to focus resources elsewhere.
Later opening hours will be beneficial for our operations, and ultimately protecting vulnerable people in our community.
And security guards on Darwin bottle shops will now follow in the footsteps of transit safety officers, arming themselves with capsicum spray.
There are really strong measures in there that it won't be misused and that Territorians are safe, but it's being used for the right reason.
These laws will be rushed through Parliament this week, likely with the support of the opposition. But the CLP say Labor is implementing these ideas far too late.
What's frustrating is that it's taken us months to actually see this come to fruition.
With just 3 days of sittings left this year, Territory Parliament this week is likely to be dominated yet again by alcohol and crime. Thomas Morgan, ABC News.
After a busy weekend of crime, Northern Territory Police has publicly made the link between domestic violence and the ongoing escalation of crime in the Territory. Over the weekend, authorities responded to a spate of offences, including multiple car thefts, burglaries and domestic violence incidents. Natasha McFarlane reports.
Safety warning acknowledged. Reason for pursuit is a stolen motor vehicle.
A dramatic police pursuit through Darwin's northern suburbs. Officers responding quickly, arresting a 16-year-old in Anula.
Confirmed in custody.
The incident just one of many across the weekend. 5 other teenagers linked to the car theft were also arrested after another vehicle was stolen in Nightcliff. Police also responded to a separate robbery on a bus in Nightcliff, a robbery in Woolagi, an armed robbery in Casuarina and domestic violence incidents in Woodruff and in Alice Springs. In a shift of rhetoric, police have publicly acknowledged a major contributing factor.
The property crime, the significant assaults that we're seeing today are really some of the symptoms of the history of ingrained domestic violence within our community.
A coronial inquest into domestic violence in the Northern Territory has heard the NT has the highest rate of DV in the country, with domestic violence-related homicides 7 times the national average. For those working in the space, today's acknowledgement by police is significant.
To hear police talking about that is refreshing, because it means that we can actually put our attention where we should, which is on the drivers of these other forms of crime and offending behaviour.
But with police experiencing a 117% increase in domestic violence call-outs over the past decade, advocates and authorities are reiterating the need for a holistic response.
It's generational change. It's prenatal. It's alcohol fetal syndrome disorder. It goes into the low attendance rates at schools. It goes into domestic violence in the home and a level of acceptance and apathy.
And how do we prevent all of this? It's investing in the prevention of domestic, family and sexual violence.
Advocates and police all on the same page of a situation far from resolved. Natasha McFarlane, ABC News.
With the summer period in full swing and school holidays on the horizon, the NT Government is looking to new measures to keep at-risk children safe. The approach will look to reduce the burden on police by streamlining the process of taking care of young people on the streets at night.
As school holidays get underway, the number of young people out and about begins to climb, and today the government announced a new trial to curb the annual summer crime spike.
What we're trialling here is having our staff in a central location to make sure that police can find and communicate with us quickly and easily.
For 3 months, child protection workers will be based at the Alice Springs Police Station and the Goyder Centre Safe Place in Palmerston, working alongside officers to get young people off the streets.
There's huge concern when we see young people wandering the streets late at night, and our job is to make sure that they are kept safe and out of harm's way.
Police say the process could help reduce the load on the overstretched front line.
It could take us hours in Alice Springs, and it happens every night. We're driving around looking for a safe place to deposit a child. Obviously, that takes time, and as that is occurring, jobs are building up.
The plan is for Territory Family staff to follow up with young people and their families the next day to see if any intervention or support is needed.
I suspect that we'll see regional differences between Alice Springs and Darwin that we need to test and understand, but it's a natural extension of the work that the department does.
Alice Springs Town Councillor Michael Little hopes the trial will make a difference, but says making parents aware of their responsibilities is key.
The audience, what these rules affect, aren't seeing or hearing it, and that audience is the mother and father. They're the people that's got to be aware of why these new rules are coming in place. They're because of your children and nothing else.
The trial program will run until February 4. Kyle Dowling, ABC News.
The NT Government and police are trying to reassure the community they're devoting more resources to tackling alcohol-fuelled crime and antisocial behaviour with a new police unit. But no new officers will be recruited until next year, and communities are worried the current strategy of moving police from place to place isn't sufficient to prevent the usual Christmas crime spike.
10 officers moved from other positions in the NT Police are the first members of a new unit, the Territory Safety Division, tasked with tackling alcohol-fuelled and antisocial crime in Darwin.
This team is an important part of making sure we stop crime before it happens.
The unit will travel to different communities when problems flare, and the government has committed to paying for 50 more officers for it sometime next year.
It's about $290,000 per police officer, and we're funding an addition of 50.
But the police force's plea for 200 extra officers is on hold until a review reports.
I will support the police review and whatever recommendations that come from this.
The police are responding to crime concerns by moving existing resources around, including sending 50 officers to Alice Springs for Christmas.
We know that there was at least 9 officers from the traffic unit gone down to Alice Springs to cover for that.
Other communities also feel vulnerable.
Crime and, the police are overworked, I think.
Tennant Creek leaders are dismayed. It's emerged police are investigating allegations a young child was sexually assaulted at the weekend.
It's never ending, what's happening in Tennant Creek. The place is sort of falling apart.
Police say they'll do more in future to inform communities about serious allegations and crime.
The public deserve to know what's going on in the community. There's no political interference. It's a gap we're working on.
The government isn't conceding crime could lose at the election.
Let's be clear, the CLP don't have any answers.
It's up to Territorians to decide that in August next year.
While moving police around might make some communities feel safer in the short term, whoever wins government is going to have to grapple with how to fund the resources police will need long term from an already overstretched Territory budget. Jane Barton, ABC News.
Good evening, Isabella Tolhurst with ABC News. A major brawl in the car park of Darwin's biggest shopping centre has left one teenager in hospital and seen 2 young people arrested. It comes as Casuarina Square partner with police to try and make shoppers feel safe, launching a community engagement centre for victims of crime.
Police say 50 people took part in this brawl, but by the time they arrived, the culprits dispersed.
Young people who came here to engage in the fight, and there were weapons involved there.
But officers spotted a teenager armed with a machete and unsuccessfully tried to taser him when he ignored a command to drop it. The 15-year-old was arrested and later released to a responsible adult to be charged at a later date. The 20-year-old who handed him the weapon was also arrested and remains in custody. A 16-year-old boy was taken to hospital with minor injuries after the brawl. Police still working to figure out who the perpetrators were and why they were fighting.
It's viewed quite seriously, certainly by the community and definitely by the police, people who go out and engage in violent behaviour in public spaces.
It's one of several violent incidents that's plagued the centre, including a non-fatal stabbing earlier this year, prompting police and centre management to open a safety hub to manage community concern.
Being a place to access, obviously we see some behaviours in the shopping centre that concerns us and the surrounds, so it's being actively engaged with the community of the shopping centre and the surrounds to make sure we minimise the crime.
The 6-month trial will see police auxiliaries stationed at the hub, along with Crime Stoppers, Neighbourhood Watch and Victims of Crime NT. Centre management controls who's allowed inside Casuarina Square and therefore the hub. They've previously banned students from some schools coming in, a measure they'll reassess next year.
We're hoping we don't have to do anything like that again in the future. We will increase our engagement with students.
High hopes for safety leading into the silly season. Lillian Rangier, ABC News.
One of the things that we've been grappling with, well, all throughout this year is the issues that we've got with crime and antisocial behaviour. Now, I'm pleased to say that joining me on the line right now is the Northern Territory's Police Commissioner, Michael Murphy. Good morning to you, Police Commissioner.
Good morning, Katie.
Thanks so much for your time. Now, firstly, Commissioner, I have to ask, the change of Chief Minister, what is that going to mean for the police in terms of your strategic direction?
Nothing. It'll be business as usual. We'll continue to do the good work we do, as is the fire service and emergency services. We'll just await and see what the new leadership team looks like and, any administrative order changes, but it doesn't affect our business. We'll continue to do the work. We do have a strategic plan now that'll change into the new year, but, just highlight it's been an incredibly hard year. Our officers have been working incredibly hard, the fire service and emergency services, with, the incidents with flooding and fire and, weather events. But we won't change our posture. We'll continue to do the good work we do to protect the community.
Now, what do you mean in terms of changing your strategic plan for next year?
So we've got a current one which is 2030. What we're going to do is renew it and do it over a shorter time frame and actually go to the workforce as well and do some focus groups with the constables, thinking about like a safe territory, how we're going to achieve that through crime suppression, detection, disruption, investigation, and another pillar can be around the workforce and the well-being. So well-being of our people is incredibly important. They've worked incredibly hard and it does take a toll on their mental health and their physical health. So focusing that, making that a real priority, investing in that as well. and then, innovation and future-proofing the police force into the future, what that's going to look like on the back of, there's some exciting things happening with the tri-service separation with the fire and emergency services, getting their own commissioner next year and a level of independence to the ministerial portfolio. The restructure of the police force with 2 additional portfolios focusing on social order. And with the intro, crime is a priority for us because too many people experience crime types across the territory. We're working incredibly hard to reduce that.
Well,
so those changes in the police force as well, we have to adjust our thinking into the future and go to the workforce so they are part of it, so it's co-owned, co-designed.
Commissioner, we did read out those crime stats yesterday, the latest crime stats. They're shocking. I mean, some of those rates are at a 10-year high. What is your plan to bring those rates down and really make people feel safe to live in the Northern Territory again?
So we've got a few priority areas. So the domestic violence and youth issues are still front and centre of our minds. We've created a new portfolio for domestic violence and youth because we know the link between both of them, domestic violence displacing youth onto the street, and then they make poor choices and commit crimes. So we're investing in that, but just not as a police force, but whole of government, through territory families, through education and health, and through the action plan with the domestic violence, and obviously through probably what we'll see through recommendations from the coroner shortly of the 4 inquests, how we adjust our footprint around focusing on recidivist victims, reducing harm to them, how we actually address high harm offenders and better manage them to change their behaviours and investing in programs. So domestic violence is a huge, a massive priority for us. When we look at social order, there's some things coming up to change that posture as well. We've seen the announcement of the Territory Safety Division, which will see a high tempo, high visibility policing team that'll probably be built over the next 4 months, a team of 57 that'll focus on liquor, bail compliance, domestic violence compliance, but also a surge capacity, and they'll be there to back up officers in the field to public calls for assistance. And in all the suite of changes with incremental changes to operating hours for hotels, the harm minimisation bill, the BDO and BDR amendments, those suite of changes will make a difference to reduce, liquor and that as an enabler for crime.
Yeah, look, I'll delve a bit more deeply into some of those issues in just a moment, but that new unit that was announced last week that's going to be based in Nightcliff, I mean, is that still going to go ahead given the change to the Chief Minister?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a commitment. We've got the new unit will be established and it'll grow over time as we've got 85 recruits in the college at the moment. As they come out into the field, then we'll recruit to the positions in the new safety division. I just can't advertise 57 positions now because it'll draw down from the front line. So it just needs to be a graduated recruitment process into that new division. And obviously we've got to procure equipment and cars as well because they'll have additional vehicles to support their operations. We'll go through that procurement process. That will be based in Nightcliff. There's obviously the youth engagement and other teams there as well, but there'll also be a presence from the Domestic Violence and Youth Command into Nightcliff Police Station, so it's better utilised.
Yeah, I was going to say, why has that location been decided? Is it because, that Nightcliff Police Station, it's there, it's massive, and it is being underutilised?
Yeah, it's got lots of space in there and it's underutilised and we need to use it. So we're going to put some resources in there. Whilst, that'll be their base, they probably won't be there because they'll be out in the field. The Territory Safety Division, whilst they're based in Darwin, can surge into other areas of the Territory as well when required and even come to Alice Springs.
Is it going to be, though, a situation where you're having to draw like general duties officers from other locations and from other areas where they'd usually be working to work in that division?
Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to explain before. As the recruits come out of the college and, we bolster the front line, that means we can put the people who want to apply from the front line into that Territory Safety Division. I just can't populate the division right now because it would draw down from the general policing units. But it's about adjusting our, what we do to prioritise what's important for the community, and it's that high engagement, high visibility, deterrence and addressing social order issues, addressing youth, people who have their houses broken into and their cars stolen. well, we've got to better manage those offenders as well and do some work in that space.
Commissioner, it has been, like, when you look at those crime stats, they are incredibly high, and I think we all understand that it is year on year, but we are all grappling with the issues that we've got with crime, and by and large, people are very supportive of the Northern Territory Police and the work that you guys do. Last week, though, there was that large disturbance at Casuarina. Now, general duties attended, and while in attendance, officers observed a man hand a youth a machete before the youth allegedly ran towards members of the public, ignoring police commands to stop. Now, police then pursued the youth on foot, deployed a taser, and a nearby member of security assisted in apprehending that 15-year-old, who was subsequently arrested with a machete and drugs in his possession. Now, the youth was uninjured. That youth was then conveyed home to a responsible adult. Why?
That's a decision, obviously, of the management team at the time, considering all the circumstances. I've asked the same question, probably in that scenario, and I've got to be careful, the beauty of hindsight, but
yep.
I trust our officers to make the decision at that point in time, considering all the circumstances, the control, if there is a responsible adult they can go to in the first instance and proceed by summons, because arrest is last resort. But how do we balance that with a youth that's armed with a machete? And we allege that the machete was passed to him by the adult, and he had drugs on him. Yes. How do we best manage the future for that child? And is it through the criminal justice system? Noting that carrying a machete with the change in legislation actually changes the bail onus as well. So I've asked those questions of the team, and I respect the decision that's been made by the management team and the operators at the time, but what I can say, it's an incredibly swift and professional response by our officers, and that just demonstrates by what they do each and every day.
I mean, look, I totally understand what you're saying, and I feel the same. I respect the hard work that our Northern Territory Police do, and very often I feel like they are put in these situations that are so incredibly dangerous, and they're protecting the community. But I just wonder, and I know that the public is asking, what kind of message does that send to other people getting in brawls at Casuarina or anywhere else who then are armed with a weapon, and, particularly for our young people, and they're then just being taken home to a responsible adult?
Yeah, and it is a complex decision-making process when you're dealing with young people, but we still put a lot of young people before the court as well for their behaviours. And that's the officers making those considerations in consultation with an authorised officer, a senior sergeant. And then there's some collaborative work with Territory families as well. And this is one instance, but there's many other instances where we've arrested youth and put them before the court. The youth court's quite busy as well, so... it's a case-by-case basis. I respect the decision they made at the time. And we'll just keep doing what we're doing, and we'll respond and address crime and take the necessary action to make sure that the community is protected. I mean,
is that the concern here, though? Are we in a situation where the youth courts are so busy, where our jails are so full, that those kinds of factors are being taken into account as well when you're dealing with people?
That's not my decision, Katie. That's a decision for the Justice Administration and the judges. They consider a lot of things, but we obtain the evidence and put people before the court, and let the justice system make determinations.
Now, I have been sent some vision as well from Alice Springs, and I know that you are joining us this morning from Alice Springs. Darren Clark has a huge amount of vision from the weekend by the look of it, a group of about 40 people roaming the streets and getting into fights. What work is happening in Alice at the moment, and how are things going from your perspective?
Really, really well. I've been in Alice Springs since about the 7th of December, coming in and out for a couple of nights. It's going really well. The officers, obviously, the public response with our response patrols are supported by Operation Drina, which is 3 to 4 additional units every night, every rostered shift. That's making an incredible difference. It's still quite busy here. The social order's still busy. I still have some concerns with some licensed premises here. I think the footage you're referring to is outside some licensed premises opposite the council chambers. That concerns me, and we've got our team actually going to have a discussion with the management of the hotels there today, because we talk about the responsible service of alcohol. when people come out of a licensed premises, they can't be at a state of intoxication that causes serious concern to the public and engage in poor behaviours. So that's something we're continuing to focus on.
I mean, some of them look like kids, though. Some of them look quite young. And I guess for some people in Alice, they're going to be thinking to themselves, listening this morning, while you are saying things are going quite good, I guess if you've got huge groups congregating and punching on with each other, it might not seem that good to some of the locals.
No, that's right. What I can emphasise is our response is strong. What we're trying to do is adjust it so we don't have to respond and we can deal with some of the enablers of these behaviours as well. What we're seeing in the last, even since the establishment of the Safe Place with Territory Families, we've had 14 young people taken to the Safe Place in Alice Springs, and it's making a difference because it's engaging with parents and they're aware of the choices the children are making, so it's hopefully correcting behaviours. They're vulnerable kids who are usually out of the house for other reasons, usually linked to domestic violence. What we're also seeing is a massive efficiency for our police officers because we're not driving around for hours on end trying to take a child to a safe place. We try a responsible adult first or a safe place. If that doesn't exist, it goes to the Territory Family Safe Place. We do a handover and we get back into doing police business.
All right, I want to ask about those changes to bottle shop opening hours for the top end. How are things going with that at this point, do you think, from your perspective?
Yeah, so I asked the question this week. I just asked how did the first week go with the 2 hour later opening. The evidence from the patrollers is they're seeing less social order behaviours, like antisocial behaviours, in the field. It's probably too early to say. It'll be evaluated at the end of January. That's where we'll have a better collection of information from patrollers, the protected custodians, feedback from the community, all of those really valuable data sources where we can actually get a bit of a snapshot over 8 weeks. So far, it looks positive, and we'll just have to see and measure it, and we'll see, obviously, the other amendments with the liquor harm reduction, the BDOs, the BDR, a higher visible presence from policing, engaging with the public and addressing those issues. So the suite of changes will continue to make a difference.
Are we just tinkering around the edges here, though? I mean, there has been some suggestion that you would like to see people unable to buy alcohol if they don't have a fixed address to be able to stay and consume it.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I've discussed. It's around what type of items are for sale. So, your 1,125ml bottles of spirits, we see that in the field. They cause considerable harm on consumption in public places. More scrutiny around safe places to drink and people with a lawful place to consume liquor. So if people are leaving and they go and drink in a public park or a public space, we know, we're quite confident that we'll respond to some type of incident there later after that alcohol is consumed. So that's where the proactive stuff is through the Territory Safety Coordination Centre, to look at the patrolling network, look at preemptive measures we can do to engage to reduce those levels of harm and actually still engage with hospitality and industry to put better measures in place to help us. Keeping in mind, like I asked for a lot, it's a regulated, lawful business and a business model, so it's about having those conversations and relationships to say, how can we do some things to better improve community safety? Because liquor is a huge enabler for us in harm in the community.
Well, and I guess then when we look at the rates of domestic violence as well, like how much of that domestic violence is happening in public places when people are consuming alcohol?
A great deal of it. A lot of the serious violence offences or homicides, intimate partners, alcohol's involved, and it's public places. So it is one of our, what we focus on to try and address those issues, but not just as a police force, but a whole of government, even the domestic violence portfolio. And I know how much work Minister Warden did when she was the police minister, because she had the domestic violence portfolio as well. So that real preemptive, victim survivors and those high harm offenders, because it's usually we see a high rate of recidivism for people who commit serious violence against women and children.
I know you are. I know you're pressed for time, as are we this morning. I've just got a couple of other things that I do want to ask you about. I mean, just on that alcohol, for an example, over the weekend, a friend of mine who's got a property, they went out to go and check on their property out in the Palmerston area. There's glass, there's things all smashed up around the place. People out there drinking in that spot. It's not a public spot, but there's they're sort of there on the footpath, drinking in that spot, asked where they're from. They said they're visiting from a community. Said, well, where are you staying? Well, we're sort of staying here. I mean, how do we stop that kind of thing from happening, where people are coming in from town, they're purchasing alcohol, which they're lawfully allowed to do, but then drinking it in those public or sort of, semi-public places, in places like Yarrawonga on footpaths, running amok, and it just sort of continues to happen.
So I think what's important is to make sure that that's reported to us, so we can get an idea of where behaviours are occurring and when. Then there's the practical element of dispatching patrols or patrollers or Larrakia to go and engage with them. What you'll see with the new amendments in the Liquor Act is if they're drinking in a public place or a high-risk area or a restricted area, the police officer can add them to a BDO, which gets them on the BDR for 7 days. If there's a second occurrence, it's another 7 days. And if it's a third occurrence, it's 3 months. So you'll see some more audience on the BDR into the future, and through the automation, we're just rolling out the Serpro system for the new police system on the 27th of November. That's automating some of those processes for us, and we're trying to automate some things into next year as well, so it's easier for the police force to add people to limit the access to alcohol when they cause harm from it.
Commissioner, I am told that Serpro system at the moment, it is quite an arduous sort of situation right now where it's taking quite some time to process things. Is that going to get a bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last thing I need is a cop tied to a desk typing in data. So what we're doing is centralising an input area, and we'll have some administrative officers doing the data entry. I just can't afford, like if an officer goes out and deals with 10 people drinking in public places and it's, say, conservatively 10 minutes each, that's an hour and 40 minutes of data entry. It's not acceptable. We need to be doing out police work in the field. So we're standing up a team to support that operation, so we're not doing data entry until it's automated, probably, early to mid next year.
Well, Police Commissioner, it has been a massive year. For you, I know you've been acting in the role. You're now in that role permanently. It's been such a massive year. When you look at 2024 and how you're going to juggle it all and how you're going to sort of meet the community's expectations of that management of crime, and I know it is definitely not just the job of you as the Police Commissioner or the police force. It is absolutely across the board. But for you in your role, how are you going to approach 2024?
Well, a couple of things is with new ideas, exploring new ideas, listening to the front line, how to make the difference, listening to the community. We're all in this together, and how we make a difference collectively. Our workforce, it has been a huge year, and we will continue to work incredibly hard, but we need to explore new ideas and new ways of doing things, and that real collegiate partnership across government and NGOs to make a difference to people's lives and drive down crime and basically protect Territorians. So we've got a few challenges ahead. We're up for it, and I look forward to an exciting 2024, and I really hope that settles down a bit.
Yeah, I think we're all hoping exactly the same thing. And, Commissioner, any message for Territorians over that Christmas break?
Yeah, look, all the best for 2024. It's been a big year. It's been a tough couple of years. Be safe, enjoy time with your family, and if you're travelling, take care on the roads. We've already got an unacceptably high road toll. Take a break, plan your trips, wear your seatbelt, don't speed, don't drink and drive, all those the common messages. But yeah, look after each other, enjoy the time with family, and we look forward to a prosperous 2024.
Well, Northern Territory Police Commissioner Michael Murphy, we really appreciate your time this morning. I know it's been an extensive chat. We appreciate you speaking to us, and all the very best over the Christmas break. Hope you have a lovely Christmas with your family, and I hope that all of our Northern Territory Police Force, hopefully things do get a bit calmer, and I really, we thank our whole Northern Territory Police Force for all of the very hard work that they do.
Yeah, and don't forget the fireys too, and emergency services, and coming into a period of possibly cyclone, and luckily enough, Jasper's not coming towards us, so we'll have a bit of respite there. But yeah, the tri-service works incredibly hard, and I appreciate your sentiment, and thank you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Northern Territory Police have reported feeling overworked and under-supported by the NT Government in the first union satisfaction survey since Police Commissioner Michael Murphy stepped into the role. 42% of union members took part in the survey, which will be submitted to the Government's review into police resourcing. The survey found 98% of respondents do not believe there's enough police to do what's asked of them. 91% said they didn't feel supported by the government, and more than 60% rated morale in the ranks as low or very low. The results are largely unchanged from the last survey 12 months ago, despite several changes to leadership in the past year.
We've got a relatively new commissioner, we've got a relatively new Minister for Police as well. I know both of them are very passionate about supporting police.
What's needed now is urgent reform.
Welcome to the program. More than 4 years ago, an attempt to arrest an Aboriginal man in Central Australia ended with the man's death. Police officer Zachary Rolfe was acquitted of all charges over the fatal shooting of 19-year-old Kumanjay Walker. This week, he fronted a long-running coronial inquest into the death to answer new questions about his conduct on the job and the culture within the Northern Territory Police Force. Ella Archibald-Binge and Melissa McKay report, and a warning. This story contains strong racist language and the image of an Aboriginal person who's died.
It's known as the heart of Australia. But for the past 18 months, a coronial inquest has exposed the stark divisions in the harsh and beautiful Red Centre. More than 70 witnesses have fronted the Alice Springs Coroner's Court to dissect a fatal police shooting that rocked the Northern Territory. The man who pulled the trigger is the last.
Morning, Mr. Rolfe. How are you feeling about giving evidence today?
Zachary Rolfe was acquitted of all criminal charges over the shooting of Kumanjay Walker. But the inquest has a broader scope, raising fresh questions about the culture within the NT police force and examining the officers' past conduct. For Samara Fernandez-Brown, the process is a chance to find answers about the circumstances of her cousin's death.
From Zachary Rolfe, I think all we've ever asked for is the real story, and I hope that he's able to give that.
It was in the remote community of Yundamu, 3 hours from Alice Springs, where an attempt to arrest Kumanjay Walker for breaching a court order and assaulting police ended in his death. Zachary Rolfe shot the 19-year-old 3 times after being stabbed with a pair of scissors. A court later found the officer was acting in self-defence. Law professor Thalia Anthony has been following the case.
We have seen in the inquest a huge amount of evidence come to the fore that wasn't available in the trial, and the community and the coroner certainly want Rolfe to answer these new accusations and this new evidence.
This footage from Mr. Rolfe's own body-worn camera in 2019 is among new evidence played to the court. It shows him pushing 2 Indigenous men who appear to be intoxicated, fighting in an Alice Springs park.
Stay on the ground.
Around 6 minutes later, he tells a fellow officer,
I'd have to give them an infringement just to justify the use of force. Oh yeah, we'll give them both an infringement.
On the stand, Mr. Rolfe admitted,
I think there are many ways, looking back in hindsight, how you can handle a situation better.
Telling the court it was resolved extremely efficiently and quickly, adding,
and it may not look good, but pushing 2 men onto soft grass is a very low-level use of force, and it can be confronting for people who are not used to confronting violence on a daily basis.
Later, in the muster room, Mr. Rolfe watches the footage back, filming it on his phone, as he provides commentary to fellow officers.
Get 'em, boys. Bullets. Oh, bullets.
And your reason for filming it on your phone was for a laugh, to play it back later on, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
What do you think about that conduct?
Yeah, it's completely unprofessional, and I have no excuse for that.
Body-worn footage of several other incidents involving Mr. Rolfe have been played to the court. including this 2018 arrest of a 14-year-old boy who had breached his bail conditions, hiding in a wheelie bin.
Got him. Sorry, sir. I'm sorry, sir.
The coroner heard the former officer was involved in 46 use of force incidents during his 3-year stint in Alice Springs. Mr. Rolfe said that was not a high number given he'd been called to more than 3,000 jobs in that time, pointing to internal investigations which found his use of force was not excessive.
Do you accept that you had developed a bad attitude towards Aboriginal people accused of crime?
No.
Do you accept that you had developed a bad attitude, at least to Aboriginal men who you were arresting, for alleged criminal offences?
No.
Mr. Rolfe was also questioned about text messages shown to the court in which he used racial slurs.
The fact that I have, for example, said coon in my messages, the fact that that's been made public, which would have caused hurt to a number of people, especially kids, who should have been able to trust the police force, like that kills me. So I'm sorry for that.
Mr. Rolfe, who has since been dismissed from the police for publishing an open letter about the inquest online, told the court racist language is used everywhere in the NT police, telling the coroner a so-called Aboriginal-only section of an Alice Springs pub was widely referred to by local police as the Animal Bar. And a police tactical response unit handed out a Coon of the Year award where
staff would make the recipient dress up in a toga, and they would give him a wooden club with some nails in the end.
Senior members of the unit filed affidavits with the coroner today, saying while there was an award for caveman-type behaviour, it was called the Noogada Award, a made-up word with no known Indigenous connotations. It has since been renamed.
What's been really startling about this inquest is if you look at the evidence that's been brought forward from Walker's family, from the community, from government, police and outside experts, is that they've collectively painted a picture of systemic racism in the police force.
Mr. Rolfe's evidence this week ignited tensions outside the court and prompted a swift response from NT Police in Darwin.
That's his evidence. That's the events he's giving to the court in the process. When I go to Alice Springs and the other stations around the Territory, I do not see those behaviours, I do not hear those comments.
I think racism in any organisation is unacceptable. There will be an investigation, as the Commissioner has highlighted, led by the Deputy Commissioner and other agencies.
Hearings are due to finish this week, the end of a gruelling chapter.
We're feeling extremely burnt out and exhausted. I just think Kumanjat needs to be remembered as somebody that is extremely loved and extremely missed, and that had a life that was worth living.
Joining me in the studio right now is the Northern Territory Police Commissioner, Michael Murphy. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Katie.
Now, Commissioner, before I get into the issues of the day, and there is a lot to get through, I do want to just ask you, I've literally just learned that Northern Territory Police are calling for information after an armed burglary in Darwin overnight. At about 12:45 this morning, police received reports that 2 males and a female unlawfully entered a residence on Dashwood Place, armed with a gun.
Yeah, that's correct, Katie. So there was 3 people entered a unit. There was a 57 and a 61-year-old occupant. They threatened them with a shotgun and left the premises. We don't have the gun yet. We don't know who the 3 people are. We've got detectives currently working on it incredibly hard. We have deemed it's a low public safety risk and we suspect it's targeted.
But, I mean, in the press release it says at this stage it's not believed the offenders were known to the victims, though.
Yeah, I think they're working through that to validate that now. We've got some detectives working on that. We're hoping for a fairly quick and swift clear-up.
So hang on. So are we in a situation right now where we have got 2 males and a female armed with a gun who are on the loose somewhere?
That's correct, yeah.
That sounds quite concerning, I think, to anybody listening this morning.
I've spoken to the Assistant Commissioner of Crime this morning, who's spoken directly with the detectives. They've obviously privy to information that I'm not, but I've asked specifically what is the risk to public safety, and I'm advised that it is low, it's deemed low. They will work very quickly to identify who these people are. We've got some technology in the area where the fence occurred that will help us with the investigation, and we'll clear this up pretty quickly, as we do with all the other crime types, but this is being treated very seriously.
Well, Commissioner, it does sound like it's bloody serious. I mean, we've got somebody who's on the loose, or we've got 3 people on the loose with a firearm. Like, to me, that sounds incredibly frightening. What assurances can you give the public this morning that they're not at risk?
Look, I'm relying upon the information coming from the detectives, and I've been very specific in my questioning to the Assistant Commissioner, and I've got a level of confidence that the public are not at risk, and will identify who these people are, and in the efforts of the investigation recover the firearm, but there's no need to be alarmed. We've got detectives working on this, and we'll resolve it as quickly as we can.
OK, there's going to be people listening this morning thinking, why are we just learning about this now when it happened at 12:45 this morning?
I guess it's because we want to get the correct information out to the public as well. It is pretty swift to get it out this morning, but the detectives have to speak to witnesses, consider the time of night, look at initial inquiries, assess the risk, and then we have moved fairly quickly to get the message out.
All right, Commissioner, I'm going to move along because there is so much for us to cover off on this morning, and we will no doubt stay on top of this issue that we're becoming aware of this morning with these 3 people are still out at large at this point in time with the firearm. We will certainly stay on top of that, and no doubt your team will let us know if there's any updated information.
Yes, of course.
But look, news breaking this morning that the NT Independent reporting that the Police Minister, Brent Potter, has shared Facebook posts which have now been deleted, in which he's reportedly quoted Nazis, Vladimir Putin. In some instances, many would deem the posts racist. According to the report, the extensive series of posts included far-right sentiment between 2013 and 2019, which appeared to cease shortly before he was employed as an advisor to the former Deputy Chief Minister, Nicole Manison. Now, I've not seen all the posts. I've seen some of them, but I mean, we're hearing this, of course, on the back of a week last week where there was claims made in the coronial inquest by Northern Territory Police Constable Zachary Rolfe of systemic racism within the Northern Territory Police Force. Commissioner, first off, have you seen those posts by the Police Minister?
No, I haven't. I'm aware of the article, but it's not appropriate for me to comment on the article at this time.
I do want to ask, though, I mean, on Monday, the Chief Minister, Eva Lawler, said, I'm concerned about, it does worry me about racism. We've seen that across the world there is a strong right-wing element around not being accepting of different people. And in the Territory, that is one of the absolute assets of this place, is having such a diverse population. Are you concerned that we may have people entering the Northern Territory Police Force or entering high-level jobs that do have quite right-wing, very right-wing views?
I think that's open to a vetting process as well. I think, going back to your other point, I think we are incredibly lucky in the Northern Territory with the fabric of culture and the diversity of many cultures and First Nations people and other people that we can understand culture, and we're actually quite protective of that, and we build really good relationships with them. I think that's the really important part of the Territory. We're quite lucky. We do see the emergence of right-wing thinking and ideology and all sorts of different thinking in the advent of social media and global events, where people will comment on things happening around the world. And, people, the people on Facebook or other social platforms make comment, own it, and we see people that are influenced by it. That is a concern for us, and that's actually a national discussion, even in law enforcement and intelligence, to assess risk to community, and we're lucky in the Northern Territory that's not that prevalent.
I mean, there is going to be people thinking this morning that, after the comments made last week in the coronial, and then after these posts that I know they're historic but that have been shared by the Police Minister, that we may have a situation where you've got really very right-wing views seeping into the police force.
Look, I don't think so. I think we're impartial, we're professional, we've got really good relationships with the community. Going back to the coronial and the testimony of Zachary Rolfe, there was a number of revelations. There was the one about the TRG and the awards. That's been referred to. That's a joint investigation with the ICAC and our Professional Standards Command. That's underway at the moment. In saying that too, When the court of history sits in judgment of us, are they going to judge us on our courage and our respect and our integrity? Of course. So we've got to think about what we're doing now to future-proof the police, to make sure it's a culturally safe and a culturally competent police force, but to look after our officers and also look after our community.
Is it appropriate that the Northern Territory Police Force, yes, I know the ICAC's also involved in that investigation, but is it appropriate that you guys are investigating yourselves?
There's a level of independence with our Professional Standards Command. Like, I have a high level of confidence with their capability, and with oversight and involvement of the ICAC, I mean, that's unquestionable.
Where are things at with that investigation?
It's underway. I'm not privy to it. I'll leave that up to the Commissioner for ICAC and our Professional Standards Commander.
Police Commissioner, there's going to be people listening this morning that read the front page of the paper on the weekend after it was reported that you are allegedly the person who made racial slurs in a Chinese restaurant, which former Constable Zachary Rolfe was referring to at that coronial inquest. Commissioner, did you make racial slurs?
To be honest, I can't remember about making any comments racially. I'm not a racist person.
I mean, is that a cop-out?
I don't think so, no, it's the truth. And, I can't start making things up to say it happened or it didn't happen. I just have to rely on my memory. It's a quarter of a century ago, and it appropriately got referred to the ICAC. He's done an inquiry. He's written a letter back to the coroner. He's shared that with me on his assessment of the inquiries he's undertaken. And the thing is, you've got to understand that where we're at now is my job, and as the Commissioner of Police, is to make sure we have a really culturally appropriate workplace that serves a very culturally diverse community. So we need to get on with the job and make improvements. We've got our Indigenous workforce is hurting after the comment shift last week. Historically, a snapshot, you talked about systemic racism. I don't think we've got systemic racism in the human form across the police force. We've got really hard-working people who are committed to public safety and looking after each other. I'm really committed to looking after the workforce, our people who work tirelessly, the community and the future of the Northern Territory Police Force. I think it's really, really important to be aware that, that we may have systemic racism, institutional racism, as far as our policy settings and barriers for people with diverse backgrounds that we need to challenge and probably reform to make sure that, I've set an aspirational target that 30% of the community of the Northern Territory is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. We've only got 13% representation in the workforce. So I need to set an aspirational target to make sure the police force is representative of the people we serve.
Police Commissioner, what action is going to be taken, though, if this investigation into officers allegedly making racist comments and having that racist award within, what was claimed was a racist award within the TRG is found to be accurate?
That's a matter for the Commissioner for ICAC and our Professional Standards Command, who will do the appropriate referrals based on the collection of evidence and their assessment. It's probably too early to look at what type of penalty exists, or I think we just need to be impartial, let an investigation run and search for the truth.
Police Commissioner, at the moment, there's so many people that are really looking to the police and are so grateful, right, for the work that you guys do. Like, even myself earlier in the week, there is so much going on in the community that people are really unhappy with. But then when you hear these claims made, and then, even when you read this article this morning, you think, there looks like there is a big gap that needs to be bridged between the community and our Northern Territory Police Force for us to move forward. How do you do that?
I think we need to be courageous. We need to challenge the way we do things and how we think, and we need to be inclusive. We went through a really hard time since 2019, but we've got really strong bonds with the community. We work incredibly hard for the community. We are the community. Don't underestimate the amount of work we have to do to continue to repair relationships and reform the police force in community engagement and not reactive. We're looking at so many different aspects about diversification and challenging current thinking. We do have a lot of work to do, absolutely, but and going back to the point, I can't acknowledge the hard-working officers enough. I mean, they are incredibly busy. We haven't had any respite. It's just every day there's events occurring, whether it's youth, whether it's social order, whether it's road fatalities. We're incredibly busy, and they work incredibly hard, tirelessly. are sometimes sacrificing their time with their family to bring closure to events, like we'll see probably with the unlawful entry with the firearm this morning. They'll be working incredibly hard to bring this to a conclusion, to reassure the public we've got this.
Do you think that these claims that have been made over the last couple of weeks have been damaging to the police?
Absolutely. Yes, they have. And my job and the job of the team and the entire police force is to nurture the police force, to make sure they're okay and reassure them, keep us focused on the positives and what we need to do to reform, but continue to build. We've got great relationships. And, I'm mindful that the coronial process is still alive, but this is a story from 2019 and preceding that. We've done an incredible, this is nearly 5 years ago, we've done an incredible amount of work to reform the police force, and we're still doing that work now.
All right, Police Commissioner, I want to move along to some of the issues that are absolutely concerning Territorians at this point in time. I spoke at length about it yesterday, that crime series at Casuarina and in the city, which occurred on Monday. I mean, reports that an 81-year-old woman was allegedly rolled by 3 youths, one of them 7 years old. Are we seeing a real decrease in the age of kids offending?
No, this is not. No, we're not. So it's disgraceful to see a 7, an 11 and a 13-year-old attack a 81-year-old woman and take a bag. That's unacceptable. They were armed with a knife. We are seeing in the younger cohort more violent offending. The knife review showed that knives weren't that prevalent in youth, but we've got the wanting powers and that preventative powers that we can use in certain places to try and preempt that stuff.
People are going to be scoffing at the radio right now, hearing that knives aren't prevalent within the youth, when then, almost daily we're hearing about youths holding people up or threatening people with knives.
Yeah, I probably should correct that when the review was conducted, the historical data didn't present that, but
okay.
You are correct. We are seeing young people that are armed with a range of, knives, screwdrivers, weapons, and we're trying to work through what that looks like about the association of weapons as well. So this is bigger issues about trauma and cognitive learning, and this is where the investment lies in education and schooling and housing and health. So they're the big ticket issues that actually need to resolve this, and we know that domestic violence offending, we see really high rates of that, impacts youth behaviour and what they actually accept as normal or not normal to behave like this in public.
It doesn't give kids the right to run amok and hold people up with knives, though, does it?
It absolutely does not. And, it really concerns me and troubles me and keeps me up at night, some of the behaviours we're seeing. We see later in the day 5 youths who think it's okay to come into Darwin City, go into 2 service stations, steal from there, approach another member of the public, try and steal their possessions. You've been subject to the same behaviours, Katie, and then go into a licensed premises and do a stick up there. But I want to prevent that stuff from happening, and we need to work with Territory families. But I can commend the CCTV operators, the canine, our general duties and detectives on the swift resolution to locate, identify, and actually seize cash, weapons, and the stolen property associated with them. But 4 of the 5 are under the age of criminal responsibility.
Were they from Darwin? Are they local kids, or are they from community, or where are they from?
I don't know, Katie. I'm sorry, but
because to me, I honestly, I had a kid that looked like he was my son's age. My son's 10 years old. Look me in the eye, tell me he's an effing gangster, and then another one jump at me and try to steal a phone. What happened to me is absolutely on the low end of offending, as far as I'm concerned. I was okay. I'm all right. But I look at that and I think, what if a kid does that to my child and then they've got a knife? Or what if a kid does that to my mother who can't defend herself? And that's how the community feels right now.
Yeah, look, it concerns me, and we're doing everything we can to minimise this disruption. We need to work out. We see the rates of recidivism as well. So this cohort of 3 plus 5, they get referred to Territory families as well, who will research their background and what measures they need to put in place, and those, what it looks like as far as bail management, whether they get placed into locations for better control and reform. That's all work that's underway at the moment.
Does education then get notified that they're not at school?
Well, yes, they would be, because we say, these are ongoing discussions we have around the education attendance, the rate of people not enrolled in schools versus the rate of enrolled who don't attend. The ones who don't attend and not enroll are the ones usually coming to our attention. And I know that Minister Monaghan is really focused on this, and the CEO, Karen Weston.
They need to be, right? Like, they need to be. What's going on right now, it needs an absolute whole-of-community, whole-of-government approach. People are so fed up. They're so over having to deal with this. And right now, a lot of us feel as though the police are like the last line of defence in terms of, your home's getting broken into, you're feeling like you've got no protection of yourself, you're feeling like if you stand up to somebody, you're going to be the one who ends up in strife.
And the important thing to remember is we are involved in an incredibly reactive environment. We're trying to flip it to go to the proactive, and with the Territory Safety Division, that's a body of work. As they form and grow, they will make a difference in the prevention and engagement. And, it's about target management too, and about making a difference to be in hotspots and locations where people are believed to be committing crimes. But I need the community support too to report crimes so we can get a clear picture of crime or activity or suspicious behaviour anywhere.
Commissioner, I know you're pressed for time. You've got to get to a press conference, but I've got a couple of things I want to get through. Just on that youth crime stuff, last week, kids allegedly targeting police cars who are on bail. Does it worry you that you've got kids being released on bail by the judiciary and they're then putting themselves, the lives of others on the road, other people in their vehicles, kids trying to get to school, and of course police in danger?
Yeah, absolutely. The behaviours of these young people and the absolute disregard for public safety and the safety of, and it's been pointed out that school kids will walk into school at the same time, but putting officers' safety who are enforcing the law at risk is totally unacceptable. We do our job, we collect the evidence, we put the evidence back before the court for the judiciary to make a decision. If we're not satisfied with that decision, we've got avenues to appeal that to the Supreme Court.
Has there been situations where you have?
Yes, we have. We don't do it all the time, but it's got to be based, and we have a conversation with the Director of Public Prosecutions about the merit of an application, because obviously it's quite serious because you're going to the Supreme Court on a judicial review, but they're matters available to us. And, at the end of the day, when they breach new offending or new crimes on bail, they'll go back to court and then the judge can make another determination based on their offending whilst at liberty. And they've made a commitment to court not to do that, so it needs to be treated really seriously.
Police Commissioner, how's Alice Springs going from your perspective? I mean, there continuously is vision shared from Alice Springs. Horrifying stuff. A lot of people there are just absolutely at their wits' end. We've seen further vision go viral. The Spaniard sharing a video of Alice Springs, I believe, saying something along the lines of it's the worst place he's ever seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen that video. I got told about it as I walked in, but I actually haven't seen it. I was in Alice on Monday. I've spent a lot of time in Alice across January and December as well. Look, we are working incredibly hard. Do the problems still exist? Absolutely. We've still got youth that are on the street. The co-response model worked to an extent, getting kids off the street and identifying what the issues are to get them in a place of safety. A lot of the times there's not a place of safety at home. We're seeing still our lawful entries still quite high. But, overnight, even the recent past, there's been a decrease. But when it's unacceptable, people's houses are getting broken into and their cars are being stolen, and then the cars are driving erratically and targeting police. So it's still concerning, but we're still continuing to plan what that looks like, and that probably leads into policing effectiveness. And we'll see the recruitment of the transition of the pallies to police constables. So we've got 33 of them commencing on the 11th of March, which is really exciting. In 16 weeks, a majority of them will return back to Alice Springs to be constables.
Is it going to mean, though, that we don't have pallies on bottle shops? That was the concern that was raised by Nathan Finn, the President of the Police Association.
Yeah, there'll be a couple of pallies remaining that can still continue to do the bottle shop duties.
Does that literally mean 2 or how many?
I think we've still got 10 in Alice Springs, but there's only a handful available for deployment. But there's going to be more planning around mobility and working with licensing, so licensing inspectors can actually go to the bottle shops as well.
So licensing inspectors are going to step in to that role?
Yes, that's what we're working through at the moment. So,
are you confident that'll work?
Oh, yeah, I am. It's about questioning people before they've got powers under the Act exactly like us. So it's about just putting that governance in place about where the consumption of alcohol is. Is it lawful to reduce harm, essentially? And, the work being undertaken for a more effective BDR, that's really promising as well. But the alcohol restrictions in Alice Springs still assist us greatly.
Yeah, that was going to be my final question this morning. Tourism Central Australia has written to the Chief Minister asking for a relaxation period, or at least a trial, I guess, on those alcohol restrictions in Alice Springs of rolling them back. Do you think that we're in a situation where that can even be looked at right now?
it can be discussed. I don't welcome it. I welcome the continued restrictions in place across the 2 free days and the hours trading. It definitely offers us respite and controls the crime narrative as well. Do we see issues with secondary supply? Yes, and we've got to do a body of work around that, and we are.
When you talk about some of the issues that we've got up here in the top end, I mean, you say domestic violence is the biggest concern for Northern Territory Police. I mean, we see that every single day. We talk about it all the time. You know, there's a case going through the courts at the moment where a woman was allegedly stabbed to death and you know, at the hands of her partner in a public location on Freshwater Drive. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we report on so often. Yeah. I mean, are our alcohol laws in the Northern Territory at the moment, I mean, does there need to be further look into that across the board?
I'm always looking at alcohol laws and what it means, and it's a lawful product that's regulated, but does it cause, it's a harm enabler for us, absolutely. Then you hit the nail on the head. Yes, domestic violence, intimate partner homicide, public places, alcohol consumed is the main risk for us. The work by the Territory Safety Coordination Centre is integral with the coordination of all patrolling aspects and the whole of government to address rough sleeping, safety of people, returning people to country and minimising those associated harms and controlling that risk.
Police Commissioner, you have got to get out of here. I really appreciate your time this morning. That's not me saying you've got to get out of here. That's your staff telling you you've got to wrap up. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. You too.
The Northern Territory's top cop has announced an ambitious plan to boost the number of First Nations police on the beat. Police Commissioner Michael Murphy says he wants the force to better reflect Northern Territory society, where 30% of the population is Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. It comes after former Constable Zachary Rolfe told an inquest into the death of Kumanjai Walker there was an entrenched culture of racism in the force. Mr Rolfe also described an award handed out to a member of the elite tactical response group named after a racist slur. Commissioner Murphy says the awards have been banned and the new employment target will help stop racism in the force.
So my aspirational target and set, and it's quite aggressive, is that whilst it'll be gradual, is to have a workforce that's 30% Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. And I want them to own it, and I want them to come to me and form a group that can actually share their experiences and actually be empowered to create pathways through the workforce at ranks.
As the government grapples with the fallout of today's revelations, the Territory's Police Commissioner has vowed to tackle pockets of racism in the force while denying there's a systemic issue within the organisation. Allegations of widespread racism within NT Police surfaced during evidence provided by former Constable Zachary Rolfe during the coronial inquest into the death of Kumanjai Walker. A review of racism within the force has since commenced with oversight from the corruption watchdog. Speaking today, Michael Murphy also responded to claims he allegedly racially abused staff at a Chinese restaurant over 2 decades ago, denying any memory of the incident.
I honestly don't recall what I said or did in the restaurant, but, you know, it's about who I am now. I'm not racist. I've grown a lot in time, over 25 years, and to the position I'm in now.
Good evening, Kyle Dowling with ABC News. An evacuation order is in place tonight as rising floodwaters in the wake of Cyclone Megan threaten the town of Borroloola. Authorities are in a race against time to get residents out while they can in what's expected to be a 1-in-100-year flood event.
After being lashed by heavy rain from ex-tropical Cyclone Megan, there are clear skies in Borroloola. But with a rising MacArthur River expected to reach a major flood height of 18 metres, the threat is far from over.
That's a significant amount of water, and that will mean that 2 residential areas of Borroloola will be covered in water.
With food and medicine already in short supply, it's left residents on edge.
Everyone still want to be evacuated, you know, because the shop here is running out of food now.
RAAF planes headed to Borroloola this afternoon, taking in supplies before shipping out the first 130 stranded residents.
We're working incredibly hard now to ferry the Garawa community across Rocky Creek in boats and get them to the airstrip. So we're just working against the clock to get people on board these flights and get them to Darwin.
Widespread heavy rains have seen river systems swell across the territory, with the Daly River experiencing moderate flooding that's expected to last several more days. The weather system now downgraded to a tropical low as it moves over the Barkly region, bringing heavy falls to central Australia, with 100 millimetres of rain in just 24 hours in Tennant Creek. The main highway north of the town was closed today, just weeks after the flooding event cut off the supply route for several days.
So it's just sit tight and be patient.
The Stewart Highway has now reopened after a temporary closure, and with the weather system moving west and expected to leave the territory by Friday, it's hoped that'll be the last major disruption. Miles Holbrook Walk, ABC News.
Hello and thanks for joining us on NITV News. A new outbreak of violence and rioting in Alice Springs has led a Territory Senator to call for the riot squad or armed forces to be brought in to take control of the town. Jacinta Price says Alice Springs has been failed by Territory and federal governments, and the latest unrest is the worst she's ever witnessed in her hometown.
Like they're taking 20-metre jumps and jumping in the glass trying to smash it.
Workers shelter inside Alice Springs Todd Tavern.
What's got a brick?
As up to 150 people, many of them children, lay siege to the building with rocks and bricks. Bystanders watch on from cars as the daylight attack plays out in the street. 2,500 kilometres away in Canberra, the local member says she was shocked by the violence.
The violence has escalated to the worst we've ever seen, certainly in my lifetime growing up in Alice Springs.
Jacinta Price says the rioting is the culmination of weeks of unrest involving crime, the death of a teenage boy in an allegedly stolen car, and payback.
Our businesses are packing up and leaving. Long-term residents are leaving. We have had a gutful. The Territory Government must admit they have failed the people of Alice Springs in the Northern Territory. They have to send in the riot squad, the ADF, whoever it takes to bring calm to our streets.
Just hours later, the government acted.
The scenes in Alice Springs yesterday were horrific, unacceptable, and we never want to see anything like that again in the Northern Territory. My government will declare an emergency situation in Alice Springs. That means police will have the power to enforce a curfew in the Alice Springs CBD for people who are 18 years and younger.
Police say the violence at the Todd Tavern was only one of a number of incidents.
It led into another, quite a serious fight where 150 people were involved armed with weapons. Our police responded to that and they were attacked. And we've seized 50 plus weapons. We've arrested 5 people so far, but the operation will be swift and we'll identify who's responsible, and they'll be delivered to the court where they can answer for their behaviours and deliver of justice.
The curfew will be in place from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. for the next fortnight. An additional 58 police officers will be sent to the town to bolster local resources. Michael Park, NITV News.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As the Chief Minister highlighted, policing operations, but whole of government operations will increase in Alice Springs effective tonight. We've got 23 additional police actually in Alice Springs at the moment with Operation Grimmel. They'll be complemented by an additional 58. 33 will be the police auxiliary liquor inspectors who are currently in training. They'll be redeployed to Alice Springs to go back to the bottle shops for at least 14 days to work with industry and licensees to ensure any levels of alcohol-related harm are curbed during this time. I've been in Alice Springs the last couple of days. I've engaged with shop owners, community and our workforce, importantly. Can I just highlight that the women and men of the Northern Territory Police are working incredibly hard in a very demanding and complex environment. And we need all the support we can get, and we will get that through the mechanism of the Territory Emergency Management Council, which does declare the emergency situation and will give us the lawful authority to look at the curfew, to look at a geographical area and control that area for the safety of Territorians and the residents and business owners of Alice Springs. So as well as the 33 police auxiliary liquor inspectors, there'll be an additional 25 police deployed. I'll be heading back to Alice Springs tonight to speak to stakeholders, engage with the team and start working through the team there. And we've got Andrew Kirkman, the CEO of Chief Minister and Cabinet in Alice Springs as well. I've been working with all our stakeholders to basically put things in place to put Alice Springs into a place of safety, because hearing the despair and some of the stories from Alice Springs residents, I've heard you loud and clear. I've heard my workforce loud and clear. The government's listened to what I've had to say as well, and we're responding to that. And so you'll see a real increase in tempo and visibility, engagement to drive down the crimes associated with youth activity. We saw, really violent behaviour yesterday associated with the death of a 18-year-old male on the 20th of March. That's led to family feuds, and that's what erupted in Alice Springs yesterday in a couple of locations at the Todd Tavern, when there was just reckless damage and violence demonstrated at the Todd Tavern. It led into another quite a serious fight where 150 people were involved, armed with weapons. Our police responded to that and they were attacked. And we've seized 50 plus weapons. We've arrested 5 people so far, but the operation will be swift and we'll identify who's responsible, and they'll be delivered to the court where they can answer for their behaviours and deliver of justice. Thank you.
A 14-day youth curfew has been introduced in Alice Springs after a series of violent incidents in the town. Some residents have described the situation there as the worst in living memory.
The streets of Alice Springs are battleground for violent unrest. Up to 150 young people rioting through town, leaving a terrifying trail of destruction in their wake. Bricks hurled at this pub, more than 50 weapons seized.
I'm fed up with this appalling level of crime and antisocial behaviour. The community has had enough, and so have I.
Commencing this evening, a youth curfew with anyone under 18 seen in the CBD to be taken home or to a safe place. Reinforcements being redirected immediately to help quell the violence.
We're sending an additional 58 police officers to Alice Springs, and they will be leaving as soon as possible.
5 people have been arrested so far, police continuing to investigate a series of incidents believed to have stemmed from a vigil held in the town centre on Tuesday afternoon following the death of an 18-year-old man.
That's led to family feuds, and that's what erupted in Alice Springs yesterday.
After calling on the NT government to hand over responsibility of Alice Springs to the feds if residents couldn't be kept safe, the town's mayor welcoming the announcement but pleading for longer-term assistance.
What else needs to happen for people to start listening to us in Alice Springs to say we can't continue to live like this?
Lifetime residents of the town with a simple message for troublemakers.
They've got to respect the place, is all the message that I'll send out. And please, if you're coming here to visit, just respect our place like I would on their place.
The Chief Minister and Police Minister will travel to Alice Springs tomorrow to see the situation on the ground and hear from the community. The curfew will run from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. The eyes of the nation on Alice Springs over what the impact will be. Lee Robinson, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Hello and thanks for joining us on NITV News. A youth curfew in Alice Springs has been labelled a draconian knee-jerk reaction. The Territory's largest Aboriginal legal service says the emergency declaration will not make the town safer and will only criminalise vulnerable children. The NT government imposed the curfew after days of violent unrest and vandalism attacks in the centre.
The first night of a 2-week curfew banning children from the centre of Alice.
Last night was a pretty good night for Alice Springs. We only arrested around 14 people.
Mate, they're taking 20-metre jumps and jumping in the glass trying to smash it.
It's this attack on a pub that sparked the emergency measures.
Boss, you've got a brick.
The fact that the curfew exists doesn't mean that we're going to start locking up kids. The objective is to keep kids out of the criminal justice system relating to a curfew. But if they do commit violent crime, they'll be arrested and taken to the court where they can answer to a judge.
But the curfew has been condemned by lawyers who may end up representing children targeted by the bans.
It's a band-aid solution, it's a retrograde step, it's not going to make the community safer, it's just going to criminalise incredibly vulnerable young people.
The violence and vandalism broke out after the funeral of an 18-year-old man killed in a car crash. A riot involving 150 people armed with axes and knives linked to feuding over that tragedy.
And the Chief Minister calling emergencies don't just happen after one incident. This is a back-to-back-to-back, several months and years of destruction and damage in our community.
We are imploring the government to actually consult with Aboriginal community-controlled organisations and Aboriginal communities before they take draconian steps like this.
But many Aboriginal organisations have backed the curfew, the Central Land Council calling the violence senseless and shameful. The region's biggest Aboriginal health provider says the emergency situation is a required circuit breaker that will lead to an immediate improvement. It has further been caused by many years of lack of investment by successive governments, especially out bush.
The people of Alice Springs deserve to be safe. The violence has been unacceptable, and I am pleased to see the Northern Territory Government taking action.
60 extra police arrived in Alice today. They will join reinstated police liquor inspectors in a major crackdown on alcohol. Michael Park, NITV News.
It was designed to provide a circuit breaker to ongoing antisocial behaviour in Alice Springs. But 3 days in, a youth curfew in the town is creating problems of its own. There's been a series of violent overnight crimes in suburbs outside of the restricted area, one involving a firearm. Authorities say the extreme measures are having an impact, but concede the approach is a short-term fix to broader problems.
2 nights into a 2-week curfew and all is quiet in the Alice Springs CBD.
So the 24 engagements with youth last night were really good. High levels of compliance. There's been no arrests related to breach of curfew.
But further afield, a different story. Overnight, police responded to 2 serious incidents outside the high-risk precinct. A suburban camping store broken into in Chacone in the town's west, with cash and weapons stolen and up to 8 alleged youth offenders still outstanding. Separately, 3 young people arrested after allegedly threatening a resident at their home in Gillen with weapons and stealing 2 cars. Police still searching for others involved in both incidents.
They were armed with an alleged screwdriver and an edged weapon and maybe a firearm, a gun of some description.
Cementing concerns the curfew has pushed the problem elsewhere.
We knew that that then meant that there would be a possibility of movement of young people or of crime out of the CBD, but it was about absolutely making sure that the CBD was safe.
With children banned from the town for 12 hours from 6 p.m. each night, youth advocates are worried young people have nowhere safe to go.
There are hundreds of kids on any given day who are not in a safe place at night, who are presenting at homelessness shelters. Many people are not able to access these shelters. So I am very concerned about where will these kids go.
All parties acknowledging the measure is not sustainable over the long term.
You know, we're only 72 hours into it. This is a short-term fix. The longer term rests with the community and the broader solutions.
The snap decision to announce and impose the emergency response left many unaware there was a curfew in place. Even now, as restrictions enter their 3rd night, some people living inside this town camp, which falls inside the curfew area, were still unaware the rules had changed. Poor communication leaving young people in the dark and at risk. Lee Robinson, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Alice Springs has had a second relatively quiet night as a youth curfew takes hold. It follows a sustained uptick in violence and destruction. Jace Kemp has more for us from the ground.
Well, the curfew here in Alice Springs seems to be working, with police reporting a second straight quiet night on the CBD streets. Officers swarmed the town as the curfew time hit. Our cameras there as patrols apprehended one youth in the city centre just after dark. He was put in a cage and taken out of the area to a safe location. The tactical response, part of a 2-week youth curfew here in Alice Springs to tackle a violent crime wave that's engulfed the town. It follows a riot on Tuesday night which saw 70 people attack the local local tavern. Today, police arrested 2 more people over that incident. Overall, the Northern Territory Police Commissioner is pleased with the impact of the curfew, but admits there's still more work to be done.
Overnight was another good night in the CBD of Alice Springs in the curfew zone. We had 24 youth engaged across the CBD area. And they're very compliant. It's really pleasing. We've got a high level of compliance with the youth who are listening.
With the curfew due to end in less than a fortnight, the next big challenge for authorities is how to safely remove dozens of extra officers and still keep peace in the town.
A child and 2 teenagers have been arrested over a burglary in Alice Springs overnight. The town is in its 3rd day of a 2-week youth curfew following recent unrest. Officers allege up to 7 young people broke into a home in the suburb of Gillen, where 2 people were present. Police say they were armed with a screwdriver, an edged weapon and potentially a firearm. 2 vehicles were allegedly stolen and have since been located. Those arrested were aged 12, 13 and 17.
We've got some really good footage identifying everyone else involved, so we're expecting some pretty quick action on that and arrests and the information leading to what actually was used.
Police say around 8 people also broke into an Alice Springs camping store early this morning, stealing hunting equipment and cash. Officers say in the 24 other engagements with youths overnight, there was a high amount of compliance. No